Councilmember Marshall,
Present.
Councilmember Shrevenick,
Here.
Mayor Baker,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Herbig,
Here.
Councilmember O'Kane.
Here.
If you will please stand and join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag So the next item is the approval of the agenda, and we have got a couple of changes. First of all, number 7A is removed, and that's same as the business item. And in the business agenda, we want to take item C with Arch and move that to item A. So, with those two changes, the agenda will stand modified as approved unless there's objections. All right, next item on the agenda is a presentation from NEMCO. Mr. Hampson.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Thank you for the opportunity to let us give you an update on the NEMCO status. As you all know, the city had joined partnership with North Shore Utility District, North Shore Fire District, and the city of Lake Forest Park a little bit over 3 years ago to provide mutual emergency management services. And as part of that program, we have Carl Lunek to my left here as our joint emergency operations manager. Sorry, my head's stuffed up tonight. Can't think that clear. But he's here tonight to give you an update on the 2019 update for NEMCO. So with that, I'll turn it over to Carl. Sorry.
Thanks, Brian. Good evening. Thanks so much for your time. As Brian mentioned, we here at NEMCO, we began back in 2016 as a part-time venture, and really back in 16 we started just to update the comprehensive emergency management plans at both the city of Kenmore and Lake Forest Park. That eventually led to the formation, the interlocal agreement, which was signed at the end of 2016 to begin in 2017 as the 4-agency partnership. So that is a partnership of the city of Kenmore, city of Lake Forest Park, North Shore Fire, which serves both of those two cities completely, and then the North Shore Utility District as well. So those 4 agencies coming together to form NEMCO. Lake Forest Park is the agency on record, means that I report directly to the chief of police over there, and then the costs are broken down, as you can see in front of you. 30.75% of the costs are split between the two cities. North Shore Fire picks up 23.5%, and then North Shore Utility District, because a big portion of their service areas in the city of Kirkland not represented in the partnership, they're paying about 15% there of that partnership overall budget. Every year we get together. I have a governance board, Bryan Hampson, Rob Carlinzi, and others from each organization kind of lay out the yearly goals. And so just wanted to walk you through tonight a little bit about what took place in 2019, just to give you some idea of where we're headed and where we've been. One of the first and foremost things is just to get city staff trained to participate and prepare for response and recovery activities that would take place. Most folks, Brian's a great example of that, wears a full-time hat every day for the city, but during emergency situations might have a very distinctly different role in response or recovery activities. So training is essential. And so last year, we had a couple of drills and exercises that we participated in. We got all the city staff together. We form a single emergency operations center, which is a blending of all the staff of the two cities, which allows us to respond a lot better to an emergency rather than the city by itself taking on that responsibility. And so We had an exercise back in November where we simulated an emergency. We opened our Joint Emergency Operations Center. Just had an opportunity for city staff to play their different role and respond as if it was a real emergency situation. Beyond that, we do a lot of other training. We got each section that normally responds to an emergency, so operations, planning, logistics, finance. We got those groups together independently of each other so that they could have an opportunity to meet their cohorts at the other cities and just talk through what their role looks like, how they would be different than their normal day-to-day function, and just kind of practice and run through the process. And then there's lots of other training that is made available throughout the years. Last year, we did a big Stop the Bleed class, which was made available for all city staff. If you're unfamiliar with that program, it is a direct response to threats of harm against people, and so it's significant bleeding trauma and how to control that with the use of tourniquets and other techniques. So it's just beyond first aid, and that was one of the trainings that we did for staff in 2019. Of course, updating plans is a constant process to keep ahead of the requirements that the federal government and state and county requires. This year, we were actually tasked with updating hazard mitigation plans. We decided that the best practice was to do a specific plan for the city of Kenmore, one for the city of Lake Forest Park, and then one for North Shore Utility District. So we actually did 3 plans. We did require a lot of input from staff to help with those and kind of facilitate those and get that local knowledge and expertise. But we completed all 3 of those plans and got them off submitted to the state through the county. So that was a big accomplishment this year. And then one of the other big updates that we did is a major overhaul of our emergency notification system. And that's a system we can use kind of like a reverse 911 system to notify folks of an emergency in our community with essential information. And we have right now a program to let citizens opt into that, where we can reach out by a text or email, or if it's a truly widespread major disaster, it works just like a reverse 911, where we can force call anyone who has a registered phone in our community, includes businesses and others. So major update to that program.
So quickly, before Carl goes on, he quickly went over the hazard mitigation plan. That is a really comprehensive plan. It took a lot of effort, heavy lifting from city staff. And like Carl mentioned, there's city staff have other hats to wear, and actually Lori Anderson, who's here tonight, was really the driver for that plan, and she did a lot of the heavy lifting on that.
It takes a lot of folks filling their role to make those plans come together and be successful. One of the other major areas of focus is community outreach and education, and so we have a very passionate community base that loves their community, and so we really want to embrace them when it comes to emergency preparedness and response activities. We have over 350 volunteers in our database. Those are folks who have kind of opted in to get emergency management information and participate with us. Of those, we have 65 residents in our NEMCO service area that have passed a background check and wanted to be credentialed members. And what that basically allows us to do is when there is an emergency or crisis, we can call on those folks and they can come in and fill specific roles for us. And we know that they have a certain level of training behind them and expertise, as well as, being that they've been through a background check and everything, we're comfortable putting them in different roles for us. It's really an amazing force multiplier and really reflects amazingly on the type of citizens that we have here in the community. To keep those folks busy year-round, we like to participate in community events and fill different roles from, operating first aid stations. We participated in the Kenmore tree lighting. Our volunteers were over in Lake Forest Park at their Pack the Park events, various fun runs through the community and other events like that that we participate in, keep those folks active and busy, and training and keeping their skills fresh. Some other things that we did, and I'll mention this a little bit later as well, is a large-scale exercise we did with the Air Harbor here at Kenmore. They've been a great business partner with us with emergency management in mind, and we involved a lot of our volunteers in a major exercise over there this year, as well as did an exercise simulating a lost teen and that response to go track that person down and find them. Some other outreach. Every year we really embrace our amateur radio folks. I know there's 1 or 2 of them hiding in the room tonight. Those folks are really passionate, love what they do. We have amateur radio equipment at all 4 NEMCO agencies, and they're great up communications resource. And with that, we want them to be very comfortable and familiar with using the equipment, contacting our neighboring communities, cities, the county, the state, and the federal government. And so we practice regularly. Every month they come in and test out the equipment here on site as well as the other locations. Every month they have a meeting where they implement some level of training and ongoing education for the group. We participate twice a year, and in 2019 we participated in 2 statewide communication drills. Just an opportunity to get on the radio, talk to our partners in emergency management all around the state, and pass simulated emergency traffic. And then every year, including 2019, we host a licensing class for new folks that are interested in ham radio and emergency communications, and we did that, licensed 8 new ham radio operators specifically out of that class. One of the other areas, yes?
So back to the radios, we have our own set of radios here at City Hall right here on the other side of this wall, and tell us about those radios. How often are they checked? And
Yeah, that's part of our monthly radio check. So we have volunteers that are credentialed. They come in, show up, city staff gains them access. They're doing this all on their own time. They turn on all the equipment, check, make radio contact with others, just to make sure that all the gear is working. They do it every single month. That's the level of dedication that those individuals have. And they've done lots of work to repair that equipment, keep it working in top working order.
And that's important because our main EOC, or Emergency Operations Center, is at the Fire District Headquarters building down the street. But City Hall is also a backup Emergency Operations Center, so it's important that in case we ever did need to be in an Emergency Operations Center, we would have things like radios and other things functioning well.
Absolutely. And the other purpose is, in a true wide-scale emergency, while a lot of city staff may be housed over in the Emergency Operations Center, it is just down the street. But a lot of you folks in the role that you would play in making some of those core decisions would be here. And so it facilitates a nice communication between those 2 locations. So it's nice to have that equipment and gear and know how to use it well. One of the other areas our volunteers and our community members are really involved is our Community Emergency Response Team, or CERT teams. Many of you are probably familiar with them. We host 2 academies or classes every year. In 2019, we actually hosted 3 of them. We did 2 kind of normal classes where they're just kind of open to everyone. And then in this last year, working with the school districts, both Shoreline and North Shore school districts, we offered a teen CERT class specifically for middle school through high school, what we refer to often as those young invincibles in our community. Not because they are, but some of them feel that way. So it was really good outreach to get those folks involved in that teen CERT for the first time ever. I'm really proud to say that as a result of that and some of our partnering and relationship that we've built this last year with North Shore Schools, for the first time ever, starting next fall, North Shore School District at their Woodinville High School location is going to offer a teen CERT class as an elective, actually as part of the high school situation. So as far as I know, it's only the 3rd high school in the state of Washington that has that program, and we played an essential role in getting that implemented over there and supporting that. So really excited about that, and hopefully that catches on, and we'll see it here at Bothell and Inglemore and other schools in the near future, as well as over in Shoreline as well. So really proud of that, and here's a couple pictures of our teen certs folks at work. A little different teaching teens than it is adults, but we got through it. A lot of other training and education, community outreach takes place. That's a big part of emergency preparedness planning, is dealing with the community. We host at least 2 workshops every year. I believe in 2019 we actually had 4, if you counted all of the ones that we did in various different forms. We also reinstated a North Shore Preparedness and Safety Fair that was hosted over at Third Place Commons. We used to participate in that many years ago, and then it kind of dwindled, and we got that back up and running. As you can see in the picture there, that's actually one of our volunteers talking about some of the hazards in our community, specifically in Kenmore, over at that safety fair. Just a great opportunity to meet with the public. Some of the other things we did, I mentioned the search and rescue drill as well as the seaplane exercise. Those were two full functional exercises where we actually moved people, goods, services during the seaplane exercise. We have such a great resource here in our backyard with Kenmore Air. And it used general aviation. A lot of volunteer pilots actually flew in supplies. We were able to transport those supplies and donate them over at Mary's Place. It was a functional exercise that gave us kind of a proof of concept that that is a legitimate way and resource that we could move resources in a disaster. While a lot of roads and other infrastructure may be damaged, as long as the locks hold, we'll still have lake water and we'll be good. So it was a neat opportunity to participate in that with a lot of other agencies involved. We were just a player in that one. And then we did a search and rescue exercise up at Horizon View Park as well with our volunteers. Some additional things that were developed and we work on kind of all the time, but specifically for 2019, every month we have a staff safety meeting that now Kenmore Public Works folks are now participating over with the North Shore Utility District, and that was part of the agreement of having North Shore Utility District come on board was the maintaining of their safety training, and so that is now really nice that Public Works folks for both Kenmore, Lake Forest Park, as well as the Utility District are all getting the same level of safety training on a monthly basis. Rob already mentioned our Joint Emergency Operations Center down the street. Back in 2019, if you remember how that year started off with some snow events, we did open our EOC just to kind of monitor the situation. Fortunately, our Public Works folks did a phenomenal job with the response and the plowing that they did last year, this year as well, but specifically 2019, they did a great job for us. So other than getting some additional sand and de-icer for them, we didn't really have a lot of function in our EOC, but it was nice to kind of exercise and practice and have a real purpose in opening it and running through that with them. Other areas that we spent a lot of time in 2019 is, of course, with our partner agencies, and that's Puget Sound Energy, Seattle City Light. We made an outreach to a lot of our community churches in the area, talk about shelter possibilities, different roles that they can specifically play post-disaster in the response and recovery efforts, and different ways that we might be able to get some training to their congregations specifically. So it was a good development for 2019. And then continuous outreach to our business community to let them know, they are the backbone of our local community, and we really want them to be prepared with an emergency response plan, because the quicker they can recover and get back up and open and functioning, the better our community can recover from disaster. And then, of course, it's hard to do any emergency management or preparation work without talking about the role and the coordination with the county, King County, the state of Washington, and FEMA. And that takes up quite a bit of my specific time, all the planning and coordination pieces, making sure that we're all on the same page and working the best we can collectively together. That kind of gives you a brief summary of where we were at with 2019. Any specific questions you may have? Anything I can answer? Questions? Great. Well, thank you once again for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Carl. Really appreciate the update. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Today, our nation lost a great American space pioneer, Katherine Johnson. Katherine was portrayed in the movie Hidden Figures. She was 101 years old, and we honor her legacy of excellence that broke down racial and social barriers. In the face of adversity and racial discrimination, she made incalculable contributions to America's space program and pushed the frontier of human knowledge by her brilliance. Katherine also made huge strides that opened doors for women and people of color in the universal human quest to explore space. Whereas Black History Month is meant to recognize and pay tribute to the many contributions of Black and African Americans to this history, society, and culture of the United States of America. And whereas through bravery, perseverance, faith, and resolve, often in the face of prejudice and hardship. Black and African Americans have enhanced and advanced every aspect of American life. And whereas, for over 2.5 centuries, Black and African Americans have struggled against the cruelties of slavery, discrimination in housing, the workplace, academic institutions, colleges, and universities, and have faced disproportionately economic hardships and social inequalities. And whereas, despite many extraordinary human trials, Black and African Americans have fiercely, lovingly, and courageously shaped American society and values through service, leadership, intellectual power, and the development of moral character in every walk of life, enterprise, and whereas this nation is strengthened and enriched by citizens of every race, religion, color, and creed. This month, we celebrate the culture, heritage, diverse contributions, and unbreakable spirit of Black and African Americans. And whereas Black History Month challenges us to learn from the deeds of people of national and local renown, as well as Black and African Americans in every walk of life who have contributed to their country and communities in ways that make them American heroes. And whereas Black History Month summons every member of our Kenmore community to strive and build on togetherness, cultural awareness, celebrating our diversity, celebrating our intersectionality for a future that does not compromise any Americans' rights to equality and access to the quest for knowledge, economic achievement, spiritual development, and cultural richness. Now, I, therefore, David Baker, Mayor, City of Kenmore, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim February 2020 Black History Month in the City of Kenmore. The city makes this proclamation to celebrate the Black and African American community as an affirmation of the city's commitment to protect and serve everyone who resides in it, works in, or visits Kenmore without discrimination, and of its belief in dignity, equality, and civil rights of all people. So Nadia, I think you want to come up here and receive this.
I can just scoot over so that the camera can see because my parents are watching from Maryland. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Hello. Mom, Dad, I know you're watching live in Maryland, in our nation's capital. I hope I make you proud. My name is Nadia Reyna Silver. First, I want to thank the council for your quick response when I requested this Black and African American History Month proclamation. Our history matters. Thank you for recognizing that. I'm a soon-to-be 38-year-old cis female person of color and a Kenmore resident. 49% of my DNA being Nigerian and half of my son's DNA being Creole. We are a multiracial and multicultural household, proudly. An extremely proud daughter, niece, and sister of our U.S. Army and Air Force military veterans. My military ancestry goes as far back as the Civil War. A proud niece of a professor and published author of Black women's studies, herself a social justice advocate, Dr. Stephanie Yvette Evans. Hi, Auntie. a proud Black American woman. Like many persons of color, also known as POC, if you heard on the street, I need no reminder or education as to where I come from, my history, or what I do or don't have a right to. I especially do not ever need to be put in or know my place. As a taxpayer and resident of Kenmore, my proud place is Kenmore, Washington. 15 years of being a multiracial family in our nation's capital on the mid and southern Atlantic Bible Belt was interesting. I don't blame my parents for raising me around and in what was familiar. Better the devil you know, am I right? It was that well-known devil that kept me in fights at school for names like half-breed and mutt and nigger white. In 1988, 27 years after the Civil Rights Act was passed, 6 years after my birth, a white North Carolina state trooper pulled my Black dad over for a busted taillight during a family vacation drive to my grandparents in Georgia. This trooper said then unfamiliar words to my dad, such as boy and nigger, and asked kindly of my white mother, who was in the passenger seat, "Do you need any help, ma'am?" While shining a light directly into my sisters and my eyes. All the ages of 6, 5, and 4, we thought nothing of it, until that devil of a white North Carolina state trooper yanked my dad out and shoved him onto the hood of my family's rusted Crown Vic. My mom screaming, "Let him go, I'm a veteran," and being ignored was a dead ringer for us to become very scared very quickly. Sitting in the back seat, watching my 6'2", steel-boned dad not fight back, not look the devil in the eye, was so unlike him. And frightening. For my dad, his family's safety and future was more important than fighting back. Rattled good and hard, we were sent on our way, having been firmly put in our place. I have heard it said to me in our proud city of Kenmore, Washington, "I'm different. I can't be racist because I don't see color." Or, "I'm colorblind," in reference to race. This is a dangerous mentality, dangerous to our culture, society, and city because it fosters the continuation of personal prejudices we all have, even me. It minimizes people of color's, POC, struggles in today's society. It limits your ability to appreciate individualism and allows you to ignore the complexities of racial issues. I don't see color means you cannot fix what you cannot see. It also means you don't see me. A special interest group is a group or organization seeking or receiving special advantages, typically through political lobbying. Black and African Americans don't demand any more or less advantages. They and all POCs simply demand equity with regards to respect, opportunities, and treatment of all Kenmoreans. I may not be like my friend Fernell Miller, a daughter of Kenmore, but I am an aunt of Kenmore. I will always stand up to social injustice and assist in our joint commitment to intersectionality, diversity, and equitability. Lastly, Kenmore's historical first proclamation of Black History Month means so much more than a full white Anglo-Saxon person city council correcting an egregious 21-year-old oversight. It's Kenmore's coming of age and a start to treating Kenmore's racial visual impairment. It is when, and only when, we as a city, community, and neighbors work together that the impairment no longer remains detrimentally chronic and malignant. With this fine proclamation, I felt accomplishment, justice, and pride in my city. Today, Kenmore has earned its doctorate in persons of color and racial optometric health, making today Kenmore's graduation day and all POCs your professors. As your professor, I say, congratulations. It is a privilege to learn about racism rather than experiencing a lifetime of it. Late is better than never.
All right. Next item on the agenda is another proclamation, and this one has to do with Women's History Month. Whereas American women of every basis of race, color, national origin, disability, religion, age, and sexual orientation have made historic contributions to the growth and strength of our nation in countless recorded and unrecorded ways. Whereas American women have played and continue to play a critical economic, cultural, and social role in every sphere of life of the nation by constituting a significant portion of the labor force working inside and outside of the home. And whereas American women have played a unique role throughout history of the nation by providing the majority of the volunteer labor force of the nation. Whereas American women were particularly important in the establishment of early charitable, philanthropic, and cultural institutions in our nation. And whereas American women have served as early leaders in the forefront of every major progressive social change movement, and whereas American women have served our country courageously in the military, and whereas American women have been leaders not only in securing their own rights of suffrage and equal opportunity, but also in the abolitionist movement, the emancipation movement, and the industrial labor movement, the civil rights movement, the peace movement, and other causes which create a more fair and just society for all. Whereas, despite these contributions, the role of American women in history has been consistently overlooked and undervalued in literature, teaching, and study of American history. Now, I therefore, David Baker, Mayor of the City of Kenmore, on behalf of the City Council, urge citizens to join together in honoring March 2020 as Women's History Month. Is anybody going to? No. All right, next item on the agenda, citizen comments. This is an opportunity for you to express your views on issues that are important to you and to the community. We ask that you please limit your comments to 3 minutes. There will be a timer on the screen up here. Clerk, please call the first person.
Elizabeth Mooney.
Hello, council, staff, and our public. I'm Elizabeth Mooney, 5934 Northeast 201st Street, Kenmore. That was pretty awesome. That feels new. So I'm even prouder now to be Kenmore's citizen. I was going to say I had no idea that this was happening, but I was going to say that we're on the right track. And I was going to thank you as a city for protecting some of the habitat up at St. Edward Park. I feel that the habitat for the wild animals in the headwaters of stream 0226 that is now protected and dark instead of turning into an artificial turf with artificial light. I think that is superly wonderful progress in environmental responsibility and education. And that's from my own personal voice. But I'm excited that we can hopefully work with education and the camps and the people that are promoting that and find places that are more suitable for the Little League. Okay, so that's my number one. But I'm here tonight because PERC started with a For the Love of Kenmore project, and we are continuing it this Thursday. So I brought along invitations. I hope you will spread the word. On Thursday, Dr. Jeff Jensen is going to come. He's a UW-Bothell Division of Biological Sciences professor of fisheries, and he's going to discuss kokanee salmon at the north end of Lake Washington, some history, mystery, and plan for their return. Obviously, Kenmore has a lot of these small streams, and Lake Sammamish is way ahead of us here. So Issaquah is ahead of us, and I'd like us to catch up on restoration of our small streams and potentially getting kokanee, if it's genetically appropriate, back into our streams, like 0056 that goes into Log Boom Park, like 0226 that's at St. Edward Park, and hopefully other people will come on Thursday, and at a big event that we hope to have in April, if we can get some more volunteers, maybe in art or the boating. I talked to Sherry Baker today and asked if she could come and help with bringing in maybe the dragon boats come time for us to have this big event with geocache and getting the businesses. Lastly, I just wanted to say last month with Dr. Richard Honor, it was very successful. We went over with a small group afterwards and had a drink over at the Cairn. And so if you could come and spread the word, I've got little flyers for you, and it's on social media. Thank you to the City of Kenmore staff for getting it onto social media.
Thank you, Ms. Mooney.
Sarah Hayachi.
Good evening. Sarah Hayashi. Actually, I just, as of a week ago Saturday, we moved into our house in Kenmore 21 years ago. So I am a proud citizen of Kenmore for 21 years. I moved out here from Minnesota, Minneapolis. I'm sure a lot of you know that because I say it a lot. Very proud of that. At any rate, I'm standing here to just give my appreciation for you recognizing the importance and the weight of Black History Month with the proclamation. I stand here as a white woman, and it is indeed awkward. This last weekend was the 51st annual NAACP Awards, Image Awards. Rihanna, the famous musician, was presented with the President's Award, the president of the NAACP, not the other president. And in her speech, she said, "Pull up. All of us have friends." She was speaking, of course, of the NAACP. We all have many different kinds of friends. What she didn't say, but what my words are. Don't go and tell POC how unprejudiced you are. Go change all of your white friends on how equal you are. The difference between equality and equity. Go teach your children equality and equity in our community and how we behave and how we use our words. I am very privileged to stand here. I learned that from my father, who protested in 1964 in Chicago. I learned that from my grandfather, who worked on the railroads with every POC you can imagine back in the 30s and 40s. Yesterday, I protested for my husband's family and his cultural heritage and my son. Yesterday was the 78th anniversary of the Japanese being interned. So we protested at the Northwest Detention Center against discrimination and internment of anybody. But that is currently happening in our country. Oh, 8 seconds. Oh my God, where am I? I really hit everything already. Yeah, I am privileged. It is really important that I pull up. It is really important that we all pull up for all of our citizens. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harachi.
John Hendrickson.
Good evening, Councilmember John Hendrickson, Kenmore, Washington. At the last council meeting, the president of the North Lake Little League came up and threatened the city council with political retribution because you didn't vote to spend the wasteful $231,000 on an EIS process that was going to provide no scientific benefit in making an informed decision on what to do with the ball field at St. Ed's. And this is the fourth time that the Little League has come in a bullying manner to intimidate the city council. The first time was back in our summer budget retreat when I was on the council in '04 or '05. They came in with their ball field plan for St. Ed's, and they were not, Brent Smith was there, and they were tried to be intimidating about it. We tried to support it. We supported it enough that the city was willing to use a public agency utility exception permit illegally to try to make the project work. When that finally fell through, after an attorney wrote a letter, our staff turned around and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we told you you could do it, but now you can't." So we lost $293,000 on that fiasco. Then Little League had a protest, and we turned around and gave them the 10-year lease at last year for $800,000. That was the second time. The third time was 2015 to 2020. Brent Smith then was on the city council, and we went into this last process of, again, trying to violate environmental protection laws. And I would break that process down into three parts. One is really a sneak attack on the public, where the city and the Little League worked together for about at least 4 months on this project before, in 2015, before the city brought it to the public's attention in a January 11th, 2016 meeting. Okay? Then the second part of that is that we had an inadequate SEPA process by the city. Errors and omissions resulting in state parks taking over the lead agency and requiring an EIS. And the third part of it is the city council looking the other way over and over again while a process unfolded with repeated legal violations, environmental violations, mismanagement of SEPA process, along with irresponsible and wasteful spending to the tune of about $500,000. And I think to stop this is you're gonna have to be honest, and you probably should do an independent report of how all of this unfolded. I think you'll find in the sneak attack process, you probably violated the Open Public Meetings Act multiple times, especially the November 2015 meeting when you brought it up under council initiatives. Also, probably budgetary spending violations. It wasn't in the budget, and all of a sudden you started spending all this money on the project. If you can get a report, tie it in with the Little League, how much they're involved in this, and stop this behavior. It's been hurting us. $500,000 here, $297,000 in '05, '08. How much more?
Thank you, Mr. Hendrickson.
Karen Prince.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Council, Karen Prince, Kenmore resident. I just really have a basic question, and it's related again to the ball field. With reference to the brave decision of the council to stop putting money into the EIS, I just wondered what the next step is as far as, I know in 2016 you signed a memorandum of understanding with state parks, and I just wondered, now that you've made this a decision, what is the document that will go to state parks saying, we have done this, and I just want to know in writing, is it clear that the EIS is no longer going to be done and that the proposal is therefore stopped? I just wondered what the legality is in there. So that is my question. I also want to thank you, the council members, who risked the ire of the constituents who really want that ball field in the park. And I encourage you to help solve the problem. And you've heard me say that before. But anyway, I'm mostly interested in the next step of how is this written down. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Prince.
There's nobody else signed up.
Anybody else wishing to be heard? Anybody else wishing to be heard? Thank you for your comments. Ms. Mooney, Ms. Hayashi, thank you for your thought-out comments. We appreciate hearing them. Mr. Hendrickson, thank you for your comments on ball fields, and you, Ms. Prince. We have stopped all pursuing of all involvement with ball fields at St. Ed's. It's been removed from our pros plan. We've pulled funding. We're not going forward with it. I don't think there's any document that we need to do other than that. And I'm not aware of any other document that's done. We have notified state parks that we're not going to fund the next step. That doesn't mean they can't do it on their own, but we're not involved. So with that, next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
And I'll second it. Any comments? If there are no comments, all those in favor of approval of the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda stands approved unanimously. Next item on the agenda is resolution number 20335, authorizing the duly authorized administrative agency for a regional coalition of housing, or ARCH, to execute all documents necessary to fund housing projects recommended by the ARCH Executive Board. Ms. Owsley.
Good evening, Mayor and Deputy Mayor and Council. As you know, the city has been a member of a regional coalition for housing for a number of years. The city of Bellevue acts as the fiscal agent for the funds that are contributed by each jurisdiction. And the resolution before you authorizes the city of Bellevue to execute the necessary documents and other actions regarding the city's part of funding 5 projects from this year's round of projects to be funded. I'm pleased to welcome Klaus Niehaus, who is with ARCH staff tonight, and he's going to talk with you about the actual projects that have been recommended for funding for this year's round.
Good evening, council members. My name is Klaus Niehaus. I'm a planner with ARCH. I've been a planner for ARCH for about 11 years and have been principally responsible for administering the trust fund. Thank you for your contributions over these many years to the trust fund. You have in your bank account at Bellevue about $96,000, of which the executive board of the ARCH organization has made the recommendation that you use some of that funding for 5 projects. I'm going to quickly go over those 5 projects with you. We had about $19 million worth of requests this year. We had $5 million to allocate. Some tough decisions. We were able to put forward a recommendation for fully funding 3 of those projects and partially funding the remainder. And that partial funding will, in fact, move those projects forward so that they can get the additional funds they need and bring some very competitive resources to the ARCH sphere of influence. As a reminder, your investment counts for the number of units created in the region. It's a regional solution to a regional problem, so every dollar that you invest, you get recognized for. Just a quick overview of how this process works. You make a commitment annually or every 2 years, depending on what the council does, on an award to the trust fund that is there and available for the best projects to be funded. In July, coordinated with other funders such as the Department of Commerce and King County and the Housing Finance Commission, we put out a notice of funding availability. And as I said, this year we got many worthwhile applications for $19 million. Those applications get vetted through a process that involves your city staff. Our ARCH Citizen Advisory Board, a member of the ARCH Citizen Advisory Board, is in the audience tonight. Those are experts with deep connections within the community that make initial recommendations after reviewing the projects. Their recommendation goes to our executive board. Nancy sits on that executive board, and they hear essentially the recommendation and the logic for that recommendation, and then advance it to you and the other member cities for ratification for the funding award. After council approval, and we're doing these council meetings through April, we will be able to start contracting with the various projects, and then construction starts within anywhere from several months to several years, depending on the complexity of the project. And generally within a few months to a year and a half, there's occupancy, and those units are then available and being used for housing lower income households within our communities. So a map right here of the projects that have been funded to date, about $64 million of local funding, have leveraged over $615 million of projects, and they've landed all over our community, and they serve families, seniors, homeless, and special needs. So with the Arch Trust Fund, you've created in excess of 3,700 units of housing to date. The investment principles for the trust fund are using the cross-jurisdiction support. There's competition for the funds. The best projects advance. Those projects generally leverage as many dollars as possible. They hopefully, in the long run, achieve geographic equity, and they are good places within our community. And as projects, we look to see that they are sustainable, both on a financial basis as well as an environmental basis. And then there is coordination of those funding recommendations among the other pots available within the state. So the first project is a partial funding of a 54-unit senior project to be developed next town over on city-owned surplus land that the city is selling at a discount. The award here would allow the acquisition of the site and then the pre-development to move forward for hopefully a project that gets advanced next year. That is by Imagine Housing. The next project is fully funding the men's shelter. You saw this project in the 2014 round as a 50-unit shelter. The need has continued to grow. It's now a 100-bed shelter, 125-seat day center for homeless men. And it now has a site in Eastgate in Bellevue. There is a purchase and sale agreement with the county. This is a surplus site of 10 acres that the county must sell in its entirety. The shelter only needs a small portion of that, so in order to make that a realistic project, one that will take down the land, Congregations for the Homeless sought a partner, and that partner is Inland with Horizon Housing Alliance, and they will be developing the larger portion of the site for 300 units of housing, which the recommendation is for partially funding, so that demonstrates to the county the intent to move forward with both these projects. So this is the Polaris at Eastgate project. It will be 300 units of housing for workforce housing, essentially, persons earning up to 60% of the median area income for their households. And there will be set-asides for families and children, families with children, that is, and disabled individuals. And again, that will be on the major portion of that Eastgate site. The Together Center in Redmond, which houses many of the human services agencies that service this area and the surrounding communities, has for many years been thinking, wouldn't it be great to develop above our one-story old strip mall, now offices. And last year they advanced a request for proposals and got good bit of interest, selected the winning proposal, which will bring 280 units of housing to the Redmond downtown over that Human Services Center, which will be rebuilt, so there will be housing with services below. And again, this is a partial funding. This is a two-phase project. One is what's called a 9% tax credit project, which brings a lot of equity to the developers. It's very competitive. We do our very best to get as much of that as possible, which typically means between one project every year to one project every 2 years. So we're happy to advance that. The second phase is a 4% tax credit project, which brings less equity and helps higher income households. So co-located with this 9% project, which features 80 units serving homeless families, there will be the 200-unit workforce housing on that site as well. And finally, happy to again be able to partner with Community Homes, this time with two projects. One is a 5-bed adult family home, which they have been doing now. We've funded 7 of those to date. A very successful arrangement where there's a live-in care provider on one half of the house and a household of 5 developmentally disabled individuals living in another floor of the house that are serviced by that caretaker family. And then a newer model for higher needs individuals for that agency. So 3 beds, again with a live-in service provider in a joint living situation. And the good news for that one is they have a potential location. I believe they're ready to sign the purchase and sale, and that will be in Newcastle. So a summary chart of the number of units that this funding round will create. It's a lot of units and beds, as you can see. And this is distribution of the funds going into those projects by the various member cities. So there are 5 projects, and I believe about 65,000 of your dollars already in the bank to go to these projects. Thank you. Any questions?
Questions? Councilor Shrubnik?
I just have a small question on the last one. The community homes, I'm not familiar with that. Is that a nonprofit?
Community Homes is a nonprofit. They are a rather small nonprofit. They have, as I said, developed 7 of these 5-bedroom homes already, and they're operating out of Bothell. And the homes have been around all our member cities.
Councilmember Curtis?
Mine is just a comment. It's exciting to see the work you're doing and just know that, small little Kenmore, we couldn't accomplish very much by ourselves, but by being able to work with everybody else, it's pretty amazing the work that's being done. And the leverage. It's about 10 times more that you guys are producing than the dollars that you've got.
It truly is exciting, and we thank Kenmore.
Thank you.
So action on the resolution? Mr. Mayor?
Yes. So we need to, one second here. We need to, I need a motion to approve resolution number 20-335, authorizing the agency ARCH to execute all documents necessary to fund housing project recommended by the ARCH Executive Board.
So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any
Yep.
discussion?
Deputy Mayor Herbig was the first? Okay.
Yeah, yes, he made the motion.
Okay, and the second was?
Karina, Councilmember File,
Thank you.
who seconded. Well, let's just be consistent. Any further discussion? Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Shrubnik?
Yes?
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
Councilmember File?
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Herbig?
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane?
Yes.
Passed.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is discussion and direction on accessory dwelling units. Ms. Mint and Ms. Anderson.
Good evening, Council. So we're here tonight to continue the discussion about accessory dwelling units, and staff is looking for policy direction. In January, the Planning Commission presented their recommendations, and at that meeting, you had questions, and we've provided information to hopefully answer those questions. So what we're looking for now is policy direction, and if there's any change in policy direction to the recommendation provided by Council. This is truly a policy discussion. There is no staff recommendation, and staff's role this evening is to assist you if you have any technical information or any information about the background information that was provided to you. So depending on Council's direction this evening, if it is significantly different to the Planning Commission's recommendation, it may warrant an additional public hearing if those changes are significant. So that's kind of what we're expecting this evening and what the next steps would be. So it's kind of up to you how you want to step through some of these issues that were raised. We're happy to kind of step through some of those items if you wish.
Yes.
Okay.
And since you guys have worked on this for so long, we're leaving it up to you how to proceed through this. And I'm sure we'll have questions as we go.
Okay, so I guess we'll start at the top of the issues raised by Council, and maybe start there, and then maybe at the end of each topic, we can see if there's any direction before you wish to move to the next topic. Okay.
Take these one at a time, get direction, so we don't end up with a lot at the end.
Perfect.
Good evening. So I think I'm the person who's going to walk you through it. So we itemized the items in the agenda bill that we felt needed direction. There were questions raised and differing opinions on these particular topics. So we'll start right away with owner occupancy requirement. The Planning Commission's recommend the current situation, the current regulations require the owner to live either in the main house or in the accessory dwelling unit. The Planning Commission recommendation is that owner occupancy continue, but that there be a hardship exemption for a period of up to a year if someone needed to leave the house for any reason.
Yes. Oh, Councilmember Curtis?
So on this one, I favor the initial requirement that the person either live in the primary dwelling or the ADU, but that after it's built, that we don't have an ongoing requirement. So seniors sometimes end up in adult family homes, sometimes in nursing homes. Their life is unpredictable, and to require a family to suddenly say, oh, you need to live in the residence or the ADU, I think would just be an undue burden. So I think it makes sense, because initially our goal is to, help the seniors with the aging in place, and we want to help the affordable middle housing. So I think building ADUs makes sense from a lot of standpoints, but we don't want to add the burden of continuing it. Also, I think monitoring would just be a real challenge to make sure it's kept, somebody who owns it lives in one of those two. And I just don't think it's necessary.
Councilmember O'Kane?
Excuse my pause. I always pause for a minute before I speak. I am pretty close to Councilmember Curtis's statement. I'm a little bit I have concerns about the monitoring of owner occupancy, both at, I think it was section D, and I believe later there's a second section about owner occupancy at item I. I think the monitoring of it is an undue burden, is very hard to do. Let me just, and with the purpose of updating our ADU ordinance to help with affordable housing and create opportunity for homeowners to invest in and improve their property values. I feel like, just skipping around, well, I'm just gonna go ahead and go with where I was. There's another element, actually, I'm sorry. I had a plan that I was going to say a statement, but we're going through this in a different order, and I don't want to, kind of overburden this piece, but I'm going to just go to my points on owner occupancy. In addition, I think that the requirement is a bit behind the times, especially considering there's a bill before the state legislature, I believe it's the second time, that waives owner occupancy. The city of Seattle does not require owner occupancy. And so I understand the reasoning behind owner occupancy is well intended, but I think it's somewhat superfluous. There are words on paper that won't necessarily be managed. And I think it would be good for Kenmore, seeing the future of owner occupancy requirements on ADU, to be on the forefront rather than going backwards and removing an update to our ordinance that will likely be changed in future years. I also feel like that there's this element where I tie in with Milton. When the ADU is built, it does make more sense than the life of the home, especially when it comes to the sale of a house with an ADU. When someone moves in, what if they want to buy both, the ADU to rent both units? In this sense, it would give the new owner more rights than the original homeowner investing in the property. To me, the owner occupancy feels like an artificial control, and it's something that goes to a limited number of ADUs that are actually going to be built. So I just wanted to share that perspective.
Councilmember File.
So looking at our ADUs and needing to increase our affordable housing stock, I can agree with not having the height exceed the height of the house. And that I can stand with 2 to 3 ADUs on a site if we are talking about
Point of order.
detached.
Point of order?
Yeah.
I think I'm confused. I thought we were just going to talk about
We're
one
only
issue at a
talking about
time.
the
All
first
right.
one.
Thank
We're
you.
going through one thing at a time.
Thank you. Okay. Well, if I back up here, pardon me. When we're talking about owner occupancy, I believe that that is a hardship that has been shown to be a hardship in other cities and even other states where in the term of building an ADU and for reasons of persons who have either had suffered serious illness or been in hospitalization or called to duty, where permits were halted and properties were lost. I think that it is important that we create equity and we think about equity and we think about creating a safety net for our owners who are converting their properties. We do want to be able to create affordable housing stock and able opportunities for our community. And in this way, I think that owner occupancy is a burden and a hardship. If there is a family oversight or they have a property management or agent even assisting with that process, that's fine, and it fills the need. We do not need to be monitoring or being the police of the continuation. I believe that is too much of a hardship for the city. And as long as we create a safety net for development, I'm fine. Thank you.
Councilmember Marshall.
With respect to the preceding comments, I think that the owner occupancy helps safeguard against too many code violations, or at least creates incentive for people who have an interest in the property and more likelihood that it's going to be a pleasant experience. I think there's serious concern altogether with ADUs because you may have in many instances less visibility and more likelihood of code violations going on in backyards. That's my great concern. I see it play out here. I think owner occupancy would help guard against that.
Deputy Mayor.
I think I'm falling somewhere in the middle on this. I think I understand why owner occupancy is proposed, but I just don't see us putting together a regime to actually enforce that in the long term. I could see us checking, when somebody's applying for the permits and checking on some sort of owner occupancy at that point. But I don't see any realistic place where we have the staff or the resources to systematically then be rechecking or reattesting or following up in any sort of meaningful way with this. So.
Councilmember Shrevenick?
Yeah, similarly, I kind of feel in the middle and actually really like Milton's compromise position. I think, having some sort of, initial commitment to have the owner be there for at least a year does prevent kind of, developers purchasing housing with the intent of simply developing the units for rental. And it also protects the rights of the homeowner to maximize the value of their home, and it provides the incentive to do the ADUs. So I think it's a reasonable compromise. I'm guessing most of these places that have the requirement don't monitor. So basically, like San Francisco, you've got most of these units going in, that are, if the owner isn't there, they're essentially illegal. They're not being monitored. So I don't want to put us in that position for any particular length of time, but having the year seems somewhat reasonable to me.
I guess I feel pretty strongly about owner occupied. I have seen too many instances where people will buy up houses and just turn them all into rental properties, and there becomes an issue with upkeep and, like Councilmember Marshall said, code violations. And I think as long as the owner is either in the ADU or in the main house, there is a greater chance the property will be kept up and code violations kept to a minimum. I think once you have absentee landlords, I think it just opens up a whole can of worms. The other issue that I'm concerned about is the idea of ADUs is to provide rent at a lower rate than perhaps what the market would bear. I don't want to certainly get into controlling rates, but I would hope that it would help fund housing, or it would be housing for the middle class that's not being able to find housing anymore because of prices. And if you start allowing people to buy up the houses in the ADUs and turn them into rental properties, we're not really doing, I think, what the people who originally built the house wanted, was some affordable living facility. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents. Councilmember Curtis.
So let me be clear. I didn't specifically mean 1 year. What I really intended was the owner of the house, from the time they ask for a permit, I want an ADU, through the point of whatever construction and permitting and everything that has to happen through the occupancy, that must be done with an owner. Whether that takes 6 months or 9 months or a year, I don't really care. But once it's occupied and the owner was the one that did it, at that point, I really don't want to monitor it or care what happens to it. The owner was the one that initiated and gets through all those preliminary steps. So I wouldn't put a timeline on it. I would say until occupancy.
Councilmember O'Kane?
I may be one of the more liberal positions on this, but what I think would be a bridge would be going more towards owner occupancy of the home, someone who's lived in the home for a year before requesting the permit for the ADU. So they're established members of the community. But, you know, I'm even stretching there, but I think waiting until the ADU permit is requested, I really prefer no owner occupancy. Actually, I'm going to withdraw that statement. Sorry.
Anybody else? Councilmember let me make sure. Anybody else?
So we've got a lot of different things to decide tonight. So I think some of these are just going to come to, we're going to have to vote on it and make a decision. So I'm going to make a motion that for this issue related to owner occupancy, that it requires an owner to, and you can help me with the wording, but initiate the process and until occupancy, and then there's no requirement after that.
I second that, and friendly amendment, I think you mean occupant owner.
No, there's a state
okay.
occupancy where they actually say you can now live in your house. That's what's the fancy name for that step?
I think what Councilmember Shrevenick is talking about is that you mean that the person who applies, yes. I think she understands what the occupancy requirement is, but what she's saying is not just the owner of the property, but the owner who is currently the occupant of the property be the one to apply for the permit.
Yes, that's what I meant.
All right, I'm confused. Would you please state that again?
Right. So I trust I can restate this appropriately. So Councilmember Curtis has moved that the owner occupancy requirement be retained from the time of application by the property owner who is also the occupant of the house until the time that the final occupancy is granted for the ADU, which is through the permit process until building certifies that the permit is complete, at which point that requirement would go away.
So then anybody
Correct.
could own the house, they don't have to live there?
Correct.
Okay, fine. Any other discussion? And our clerk is gone. Do we have the nuances of that motion?
So may I ask?
Certainly.
I just want to be clear again. So once the ADU is built, there's no, and the 12-year period is completed, there's no owner occupancy requirement. Is that what we just stated?
I didn't hear 12 years.
Or what was, or till the permit is requested? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just till the permit?
However many months that takes for the occupancy.
Is granted.
Correct.
And then it's released.
No requirement.
Correct.
No requirement after that. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood. It was kind of similar in my mind.
So then somebody in New York could own the property and
After the fact. Yeah, and
Right.
I guess the nuance that I'll call attention to is I don't see a big benefit to having this requirement, especially seeing that the trajectory for owner occupancy is moving towards not including it in local cities and at the state level. So I think I'm okay with whatever the council, where we go, but my feeling is it doesn't feel like it's providing much benefit by writing it in.
All right, any further discussion? Deputy Mayor?
Mine was just super quick. I think the nuance is it basically prevents a non-occupant, like someone just coming in, purchasing a residence, not living there and deciding to, renting it out as a single house and then developing an ADU, still not living there. So that's what it's preventing, a small nuance. And of course, right now, as we just said, someone can purchase a house and rent it out from afar, right now. So this is just saying there's going to be an extra unit there.
And
All right. Councilmember O'Kane.
I don't think I need to reiterate my point. I was just going to go a little deeper on it, but I think we all have our positions, so thank you.
All right. Any further? Deputy Mayor? No. All right. So after occupancy, it does not need to be owner occupied. After occupancy of the ADU, it does not need to be owner occupied, and that is what the motion is on the table. Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Shrubnik?
Yes?
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
Councilmember File?
No.
Councilmember Marshall?
No.
Mayor Baker?
No.
Deputy Mayor Herbig?
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane?
No.
Fails. 4-3.
Okay. So, you got direction on that one?
No?
The direction is what's recommended by the task force.
Yes.
Or by the planning commission.
Second motion. I don't feel close, I don't want to go with the commission recommendation, so I would request further review, or what?
Make
It's
a
not a
motion.
motion. Let's make a motion. Can someone make a motion?
Go on, Councilmember O'Kane.
Okay, I'm trying. I wasn't planning on making a motion on this. I would like to propose Councilmember Curtis's motion be up for a second vote.
Well, we just voted
Yeah.
on that motion, and
I
so
know.
we're not
She,
going to
she,
go back to it.
what I'm trying to say is,
She can.
if it's a choice between the proposal of owner occupancy, which I actually am more in alignment with some form of limited owner occupancy than full owner occupancy, so.
Can you define limited owner occupancy?
Well, point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Correct.
Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Since she was on the losing end of the vote, she is
might
able
be
to
out.
bring it back.
No,
Well,
she was
wait.
on the majority side, so what I believe is that she's moving to reconsider, and as on the majority side, it is appropriate.
Okay.
Okay.
So yeah,
Yeah.
she could remake the same motion.
You want to
Yeah.
remake the same motion? Go ahead.
I would like to remake the same motion, thank you.
Or be a move for
Or
reconsideration.
a move for reconsideration. I don't know what the difference, I would like a move for reconsideration. I would also be comfortable with the require owner occupancy for 12 months, if not after the permit request. Either or, I would be willing to move. What? I have to choose one?
So the motion is to reconsider.
Motion to reconsider.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Okay, so the motion we're reconsidering is that after the occupancy permit is issued, that the owner occupancy is no longer required.
Yeah, point of order. Do we have to vote on the motion to reconsider, whether to reconsider it?
Yeah.
No?
believe so.
No, we had a motion.
I apologize.
We had a motion and a second to reconsider, so we're going back to reconsider the motion.
Do we have to vote whether we want to reconsider?
I'm going to say that's probably a necessary step, but I apologize. I'm not a parliamentarian.
I don't have my
Don't have your
trusty
Robert's
book, but I
rules
can
with
go
you?
grab it if you'd
But-
like me to.
But generally, the motion to reconsider simply needs the person on the winning side. And if the person on the winning side moves to reconsider, I think it's just a normal motion after that.
My gut tells me that they do need to vote on
On
the
the
motion to reconsider, and then the motion comes back again for vote. That's my
I
thought.
defer to the city clerk.
Never
on
hurts to vote
parliamentary.
extra.
It never hurts to vote
Yeah.
extra, you're right. So let's be on the safe side. Let's vote on the motion to reconsider. So, the motion before us is to reconsider the previous motion. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mayor Baker,
No.
Deputy Mayor Herbig,
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane,
Yes.
Councilmember File,
No.
Councilmember Curtis,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
No.
Councilmember Shrevenick.
Yes?
So it passed.
Okay, so now, we're back to reconsidering the motion that would
How about if we have staff
Yes,
restate it?
you want to read it back?
She
You
did
do
it
a
more
better job.
eloquently than I did.
So the motion that is being reconsidered is to require owner occupancy at the time the permit is applied for, so the owner would be occupying the main residence, but that the owner occupancy requirement be extinguished at the time the certificate of occupancy for the accessory dwelling unit is granted.
So then, that would allow someone, if I understand that correctly, to come in, buy the house, build the ADU and flip it.
They'd have to
Not-
live in it.
Correct,
Yeah, they have to live in it that time. Most, yeah.
Right.
And then flip it.
sell it, right?
Okay. Deputy Mayor.
I mean, I think part of the thought process is that way you're not having an international conglomerate coming in and purchasing a bunch of houses to do this speculatively, which I'm not sure if that's a realistic proposition, but I think that's part of the thought process there.
Councilmember Curtis.
I would say flipping houses, usually the people who flip houses do not live in the house. They come in, they remodel, they sell.
Right.
So this is different. You've got to live in the house to apply and build an ADU.
Yes.
Mostly it's going to apply to people who've lived in their house a long time. They either don't need the extra floor, it's not safe to go to their basement anymore, they don't need the huge space, they need extra money to pay the taxes. There's lots of reasons that older, usually seniors, want to stay in their house. They don't want to lose it.
Right.
And yet, they need some financial help, and this is one way to help do that.
So you don't envision them moving into the ADU?
They might stay in the main residence,
That's not a requirement,
or they might move to the ADU.
but that's not a requirement.
No, it doesn't matter which of the two they reside in, it just.
Any other questions? So the motion then to
I-
reconsider, yes.
I do have a
Councilmember Fowler.
question. What happens if our state legislature passes this bill in Olympia and they then approve that position where the owner is not required to occupy? What happens to the decisions made here with the council? Do they supersede, or are they grandfathered, or?
Well, we have to wait and see what happens, but if the legislation passes something, we would then have to come into compliance. So we'd have to come back and amend the regulations if that is the case. But being as we don't know, we're just kind of looking for direction based on the facts that we do know this evening.
And I had one more thought, is that sometimes people purchase a home that has had a fire or then remodel, so they can then live in the home. So sometimes a house is not exactly livable condition to live in and must have a remodel process to be habitable. So I think in some ways, this could limit a person's ability to buy a more affordable home we have, for example, there was a gentleman who lives down the street on 68th, purchased a house that had a fire. And in his home, he was able to purchase this home because it did have fire damage, and he was a construction worker, was able to remodel that home and rebuild it himself. And he's able to reside in that home, and he's also able to rent part of that home. So I wonder about situations like this. If we limit a person's ability to purchase a home and become a homeowner, because they can't live in the house if it's not exactly habitable, like, you know, post-fire and a rebuild. I'm thinking about that difference, the limitations we give to people who may not be able to otherwise afford to buy a perfect stamped house ready to go. So I have a feeling that when we say you have to reside in a home to be able to renovate it and watch it through to completion, we are just limiting a person's opportunities to thrive elsewhere and develop real estate property. I mean, in other states, this is done. The people purchase homes and as an investment property and make 2 ADUs out of it, like a split-level home. I really don't see that as a problem. So I don't feel that, you know, having to have an owner occupy a space is all that necessary during, you know, the building process if it's going to be monitored well.
Curtis.
I guess my thought on that is that laws in general, my thought on the ordinances that we create, if I make it work for 95% of the people, that's probably as good as I'm going to get. There is no law that I can imagine that everybody will benefit. And to think of the rare situation that somebody's remodeling a fire-damaged house, when I'm thinking of all the seniors who can't afford, that I saw them lose their houses in the years I was a family medicine doctor because they couldn't manage a 3,000 square foot house with 2 people in their 80s. So I'm looking at the most of the people who are going to use this ordinance, I think are going to be older people trying to make ends meet. And by the way, it's going to create some affordable housing. So I think to create an ordinance that aims at such a small exception isn't the most useful way to look at this ordinance.
Councilmember O'Kane.
I'd like to, actually, for both Councilmember File and Curtis, just comment on a couple of pieces. I was just thinking the same thing, ordinance by exception or rule. And my sense is, especially given our community, the majority of homes will be by owners that already live in our community. So we're really, the exception is the person coming in, buying a new house, immediately wanting to build an ADU. So with that in mind, I'm open to the owner occupancy at permit. And Karina, I personally feel that the requirement, again, it's an exceptional circumstance. Why do we even need to write it in? But erring on the side of erring on the side of what the general need for our community is and wanting this to go through where I think full-time owner occupancy of an ADU is a higher risk than at the building of the ADU. So is it time for, may I make the motion to what?
We already have a motion.
Oh, can we have a vote?
What?
Have a vote? Can we call for questions?
Through discussing
Yeah,
this is what you're saying?
yeah. Sorry. I need my class.
All right. I think we need to vote on call for the question. So, beg your pardon? Would you restate the motion, please, since you're so good at it?
Okay, so the requirement would be that the owner occupant of the primary home must live there at the time the building permit application is submitted through the time that the final occupancy for the accessory dwelling unit is approved, at which time the owner occupancy requirement would be extinguished.
All right. So,
So you're not voting on a call for questioning? You're just,
voting on call the question. I was just having what the
oh,
question
okay,
was.
gotcha. Okay. So let's vote
Yes,
to call for question and
Yes.
end all debate.
call the roll.
Councilmember Marshall,
No.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes, and this is the vote on the calling for the question, not the motion.
That's correct.
correct. And you're a yes?
Yes.
Mayor Baker,
No,
Deputy Mayor Herbig,
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane,
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis,
Yes.
Councilmember File.
No.
So it passed.
all right, so the question is before us. Let's go for the motion.
So this is reconsidering the previous motion. Okay. Councilmember Marshall,
No.
Councilmember Curtis,
Yes.
Councilmember File,
No.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes?
Deputy Mayor Herbig,
Yes.
Mayor Baker,
No,
Councilmember O'Kane.
Yes.
So it passed.
okay, great. Now, you have direction.
I do.
Let's move to the next one.
Okay, so I'm going to slightly change the order that we talk about these in, because I think the next probable best question is relating to the allowable number of accessory dwelling units before we get into questions of parking, et cetera. So the current rules say that you could have one accessory dwelling unit on a lot with a primary residence. The Planning Commission's recommendation is that you could have 2 accessory dwelling units, one attached, which means it's inside the existing house, or attached, I guess it could be attached to it. And the second one could be detached from the house. You couldn't have 2 attached or 2 detached. You could have 1 attached and 1 detached.
All right. Discussion. Deputy Mayor.
I think the Planning Commission's recommendations are good here. I think as long as things fall under whatever height and follow all code requirements, I don't have any issue with allowing one attached and one detached.
Councilmember Curtis.
So with the review that you gave us in attachment 4, it looks to me like out of the 16, not including us, entities, only one of them approve 3 living units per lot, and that is Seattle.
That is correct. I will say that the city of Kirkland is right in the middle of this process as well, and they are considering allowing 2.
So this is my problem right now, that depends on the size of the lot. I would have no problems with 3 units on a 10,000 square foot lot, but not on a 5,000. So I'm not sure exactly what I'm trying to sort out here when we're talking about 3 versus 2, 1 attached and 1 detached. It depends on the size. Otherwise, I will say yes in some situations and no in others.
I think we'll get to that with the size for a detached ADU.
All right. So as a concept, I'm okay with 3 as long as it's a big enough lot.
Councilmember Shrubnik, then Councilmember Marshall.
I'm okay with 3 as well, and actually would even potentially slightly broaden the Planning Commission's recommendation to allow, if they wanted to do 2 detached. I think what we don't want is we don't want 2 detached, but I don't see what would be a problem with 2 attached. Like if you have a basement and then you build over the garage, which is attached or something. I don't see, I mean, to me, that would be actually more palatable than a detached, but that's just me.
Councilmember Marshall.
So, to me, I think in most circumstances, even one accessory dwelling unit in the backyard is too much. To me, even one accessory dwelling unit in the backyard is too much. We have, as a tree canopy study showed us recently, that a majority of our trees are in the residential zone. And without any such ordinances being in this ADU, we're going to compromise the tree canopy. I think if we have 3 units, that's too much. I think 2 is too much. I think 1 is too much. And it's not only the tree canopy, but I do think, even though we've got a relatively limited number to the population, amount of lots in the city where these things are going to be built, we don't know where they're going to be built or how they're going to affect the neighborhoods that they're in. I think it's going to just compromise the nature of the classic suburban post-war homes that we've got, that we grew up with here in Kenmore. I'm not going to vote for any of this stuff.
So, just 1 second. So we were just talking. The motion to reconsider and the call to question takes 2/3 majority.
This is majority for reconsider, but.
Anyway.
So does that mean it?
Are we going to go back and?
Did
No,
we
we're
receive
not.
the 2/3 majority?
No, it's okay.
We got it?
Yes, it's fine. So, Councilmember Fox.
Just a question, real quickly, before we move on to my question. If something takes 2/3 of majority of vote, and we continue knowing that, aren't we doing an injustice to our process, knowingly?
It was just that one.
Deputy Mayor, you had a comment on that?
Well, no, what I'm saying is, call the question. Okay, so call the question on your sheet.
Yes.
Says it takes 2/3. I'm looking up Robert's Rules of Order right now in Wikipedia of all places, but I imagine it is somewhat accurate, and it says it requires a majority vote. So I think, I don't know, unless somebody actually has the book.
Yeah, unless somebody actually has the book.
And then even if I mean, what it says there is that call the question takes 2/3, but even then we would have gotten to a vote at some point.
Right.
Right.
All right. Allowable number of ADUs.
Okay, so I was just going to then continue with my question, my thought. I have no problem with actually 2 attached. If it's a large enough home, there are plenty of seniors that live in their home and also rent out the parts of their homes and have, 2 apartment units. In fact, my former mother-in-law did that. To stay in the home that she loved and raised her children in, and she now is retired in. So I would be fine with either 2 attached and 1 detached, or, but I definitely think that we could be a little bit more broad than just the 1 and 1. I think also later when we come to talking about lot size, I would like to continue that discussion a little bit about the detached.
Councilmember O'Kane.
I actually like the Planning Commission proposal as is. I just thought I'd say that. Yeah, I'm comfortable with what's there.
Councilmember Curtis.
So I just have a general comment on ADUs. So back when we started this discussion a couple years back on how do we increase affordable housing, there was lots of ways that it could be done. Some are very expensive and very complicated, and some are relatively easy. This was one of the relatively easy ones. And so the challenge for you will be tree canopy versus affordable housing. So it's one of those paired comparisons. And that, so I'm in favor of, I think affordable housing is a high priority right now.
Councilmember Marshall.
Brief response. Yeah, no, I respect at least that concern and the dynamic for sure. I do not see it as a dichotomy at all. And I think the more we start just packing in these units in the backyards, we're going to have a city beyond what we can handle and beyond what we would desire. I'm glad that it's at least limited apparently to 200 some lots. I'm concerned that it could become increasing more than that. And I think we can tackle affordable housing definitely and should in many different ways.
Councilmember O'Kane.
Well, what I was going to speak to earlier is ADUs and housing policy are increasingly being found to be effective tools to use to combat issues related to climate change and habitat restoration. Increasing density in built areas, including single-family neighborhoods, is much better than sprawl and encroaching on natural habitat, especially with regard to our watershed issues like stormwater and salmon recovery. These things need to be taken into consideration as we look at ADUs. A great resource to look into this that I've just recently read regarding housing decisions and environmental concerns is in the Sightline Institute article called Housing Policy is Salmon Policy. Clean water and healthy habitat is Dow Constantine's new initiative, and it fits into this perspective. We're living in a time where what might feel like a tenuous environmental connection, it needs to be made. Water protection is a major concern, and where we build makes a difference. So when we're building in built areas, it's much better for the environment than encroaching on native space. I also will echo you, Joe. I think you know my strong environmental concerns and positions. Tree canopy is obviously a real priority. I'm just going to plant a seed. One of the pieces that I'd like to have incorporated in this is climate action incentives or something, requirements, something along the lines of either rain gardens or solar panels or wastewater heat recovery systems required in the building of ADUs so that we are getting a net gain on the environment rather than just a no loss. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I want to echo what Councilmember O'Kane said. Trees are important, but we're in the middle of a housing crisis right now, and the idea that we can freeze our neighborhoods in amber so that they're unchanged generation to generation is unrealistic, and frankly, it's that mindset that has made it almost impossible for young folks to be able to afford a home right now, because so much of this area, not just us, all over the place, is very much limited in what can be built. And this is one place where we can open up a little bit to make it a little bit easier for folks to find housing in different sizes and different affordabilities, and hopefully find something closer to home where they're not driving as much and not causing as much of an impact that way. So anyway, I've already said I support the Planning Commission's recommendations.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Well, I haven't heard a motion yet. I'm going to make a motion. And the reason for this motion is because I'm hearing that this comfort that I'm hearing has to do with the detached ADUs, which would potentially impact trees. If you've got an attached one, you're in the house, you're on the footprint. So,
I just want to clarify
although
that
they
you
could
can
expand.
do an expansion
Yeah,
or a
okay.
remodel.
I guess they could, yeah. Well, still, I'm hearing ADUs in the backyard, and to me implies detached. So here's my motion. You can just vote on it or not. And so the motion is to go with the Planning Commission's recommendation, but expanding it to also allow the two if they are both attached. And what that would do is actually create a potentially less expensive option for getting to two. So I think you'd end up more likely having two attached rather than the detached. So that's my motion. For a second.
There's a parliamentary consult. It says majority here.
There's a motion on the floor.
Is that a parliamentary, is that Robert's rules?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's a motion and there's a second.
I didn't hear the second.
I'll second that.
Okay, moved and seconded.
Can I ask a clarification question really quickly? So we're still discussing two maximum? Okay, thank you.
And we are recommending what the planning commission is recommending.
With the caveat that they could have two that are attached.
Two that are attached.
Or one of each.
Or one of each.
Or one of each,
Right.
okay. Okay. All right. Councilmember Curtis.
So my question, before I can vote on this, is I will only vote on this if we end up changing the 5,000 square foot rule. So how do I handle this? Because if I vote on this, because I'm for this, but if we do this in a 5,000 square foot lot, I'm going to be against the whole or two ADUs and a principal residence. So how do we address that? Some suggestion? Maybe it's a parliamentary question? I don't know.
So are you saying that you would, on a certain size lot, you would not want two?
Correct.
Okay.
So whether I vote yes or no on this is dependent on the other question that we haven't addressed yet. So if I vote yes on this, I could be limiting myself and agreeing to something I in fact feel very strongly against.
I think that
Can somebody help me?
So can we set this aside and go to lot size?
Could we just
That will
table
then
this?
clarify things? What?
Just table it until after
Yeah,
lot size?
Until after lot size?
That'd work for me.
Does that work?
That work?
Knew we
Okay,
had some smart-
so we're gonna set this on the table until after we determine lot size. But there's now a bigger question at hand. Excuse me, Mr. City Manager, that was call for the question required two-thirds, right?
Yeah, now we're looking up reconsideration.
Pardon?
Yes,
And
it
that-
did.
Yep. Call for the question requires 2/3, but we're also looking up reconsideration.
Okay, well, let's wait until they figure out what we're doing with reconsideration, and then we may go back and visit that whole thing again, because there was not two-thirds majority.
Push on the lot size while we're waiting.
Yeah, so let's do lot size.
I think we had a question down there.
I was just going to say we could move to some questions or a talk about trees, since we're talking about the concerns of loss of tree canopy.
But we have got a motion on the table that is set aside while we determine what lot size is.
And I was just bouncing off of what I was hearing from our assistant city attorney, that we could have a conversation at least, why they
Yeah,
were
we can
looking
also
at.
talk about lot size, which
Okay,
is
we can.
dependent on what's on the table. So let's go ahead and talk about lot size.
Okay. So we are talking about the smallest lot size for a detached ADU. And currently, in the city's rules, you have to have a 10,000 square foot lot before you can do a detached ADU. That is the most restrictive requirement of any of the jurisdictions we looked at. The Planning Commission recommendation is that the smallest lot size for a detached ADU be 4,500 square feet, with requirements that these things all interplay, but at 4,500 square feet, you would be restricted to an ADU in size of a maximum of 600 square feet, but you could only have a footprint, in other words, the part of the ADU that's on the ground, of 10% of the lot size. So on a 4,500 square foot lot, you could have a 450 square foot single story, or you could have a 600 square foot two-story, which would put 300 square feet on the ground, and then 300 square feet upstairs. The Planning Commission, I want to talk a little bit about this, because the way the Planning Commission approached this was that they looked at a variety of scenarios, starting from a 4,000 square foot lot and going up to a 5,400 square foot lot. And we drew actually the average house size, which in Kenmore is 2,500 square feet for a new house. Older houses are smaller. And then we drew these different size ADUs, including where the parking was, what the setbacks were, et cetera. And so the Planning Commission, through that process, and if you see attachment 3, That's where some of the scenarios are, and that's where the 4,500 square foot scenario is. They felt that actually the lot was big enough to accommodate even a 2,500 square foot residence with a small 600 square foot maximum ADU. There you go.
I have a question.
Councilmember Shrubnik?
So I'm probably just not understanding it, so it's a true question. So my understanding for single-family residences is our highest density is R6, which is 7,200 square.
5,400. Well, the minimum lot size is 5,400, and then you have density requirements that usually end up in the lot being bigger. So the minimum lot size we allow is 5,400
So
square.
why would we,
feet.
so then how do we get to 45? That's what I'm just trying to
Because
figure
there
out.
are a lot of pre-existing smaller lots that were permitted before Kenmore was incorporated, when the smallest lot size was substantially smaller.
Councilmember Curtis?
I looked at those diagrams, and I can see it fits the math. But I lived on a 5,000 square foot lot in Wallingford, 50 foot wide by 100 foot deep. And to add 2 units, one attached and one detached, to a lot that small, it was already only like 10 feet to the neighbor on the north and 10 feet to the neighbor on the south. And I understand anything's possible, but I saw some remodeling in Wallingford that I call remodeling. They added this ugly big thing on the top of a bungalow, a Wallingford bungalow, and yes, I'm sure it was legal, but it just looked horrible, and it's a really small lot to be putting 3 units on. So I have no problem with 1 unit on a 4,500 square foot lot, attached or detached. But I think we need a bigger lot for the 2 ADUs, whether it's 2 attached or 1 attached and 1 detached. So that's my preference. I don't know if anybody else agrees.
Yeah, I want to make 2 more points related to this, if I could. One, as the Planning Commission discussed this, the requirement for an attached ADU on a lot of this size is that it be within the pre-existing footprint. So you couldn't do an addition and put in your attached ADU in addition. It would have to be in the existing footprint. And the other point I wanted to make was that the Planning Commission was very concerned that the number of unrelated individuals on the lot should not be changed from the current standard. So that's just more background for you.
I just, or may I, or is there anyone?
Councilmember O'Kane?
I just wanted to say I thought that the direction that the Planning Commission moved with the space requirements for me was a move in the right direction. And to Deborah Shrubnik's motion earlier, discussion on two attached versus 1 additional unit on the lot. I personally like the freedom to have the detached ADUs. I think are an important component of this ordinance when we're looking at expanding affordable housing and the flexibility that some homeowners might need in order to add ADUs. So I'm very comfortable with both the space and number of ADUs that are incorporated in the Planning Commission's proposal.
Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I support the Planning Commission's recommendations here.
Councilmember Marshall?
And with my caveats on this issue, I agree with Councilmember Curtis. I don't think we should be jamming things in like that.
All right. Are we ready to, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to accept the Planning Commission's recommendations.
Second.
Moved and seconded to accept the Planning Commission's recommendations. Any further discussion? Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Marshall?
No.
Councilmember Curtis?
No.
Councilmember File?
No.
Councilmember Shrubnik?
No.
Mayor Baker,
No.
Deputy Mayor Herbig,
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane.
Yes.
Failed. 2-5.
Right. Where do we want to go with this? Councilmember Curtis.
I'd like to make a motion that you can have one primary residence and one ADU on a 5,000 square foot lot, but to have two ADUs, whether two attached or one attached and one detached, you need a 10,000 square foot lot. There's probably a more elegant way to say that. But does it make sense? So 10,000 square foot, you can get your two ADUs, 5,000, up to 9,999. You can build one ADU plus a primary. And over 10,000, you get to add your second ADU.
And I guess I would not be in favor of that because at 10,000 feet, square feet, you can subdivide. Correct?
No, not if your minimum lot size is 50.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Sure? I mean, you certainly would be sure.
I don't, in the R6, if the minimum lot size is 5,400, you could not subdivide at 10,000.
Okay, so 5,400, okay. See, I guess I would like to see that down to 8,000 for that.
I'd be willing to go for that. So up to 8,000, we can have a primary and a ADU.
Right.
And then over 8,000, we can have a primary and two ADUs. Can I amend my own? We didn't have a second. So we're still discussing
Yes.
my motion. So does that feel a little better?
8 with 1?
So less than 8 would have one ADU, a primary. 799 would have one primary and one ADU, and over 8,000 and above would have.
Attached and a detached.
Or two attached.
Or 2 attached.
Yeah.
You want to make a motion
Second.
to that? You
Yes,
just
I'll
made
make,
it.
I just made that, made the
And it
motion,
was seconded.
make it sound prettier.
So up to 799, you can have 1. 8,000 and above, you can have 2. Councilmember Marshall.
So I think in addition to the compromising of the tree canopy and our environment, we'll have more impervious surfaces. That creates problems with stormwater and runoff, and then also hurts the environment in turn, not only with stormwater creating further damage when there are greater amounts of water running through and discharge, but through potentially discharge of chemicals from these unnatural environments, so I think it hurts the environment.
But correct me if I'm wrong, we got NPDES that sets drainage requirements and that back to forested levels for any new permitted stuff, correct?
I don't know the surface water regulations enough to say that's true or not.
Oh, I
All I
remember-
know is that there are surface
I
water
remember
regulations
hashing that one
that
for
you need to
months.
comply with, but I don't know if I could say for sure that your statement is correct.
I might add one comment that might help, which is that the current rules are, the only reason a single house is constrained is by setbacks. So that a single, as we're thinking of all these things, you could recognize that a single house could build all the way to the setbacks and take up as much of the yard as possible. So.
Councilmember Curtis.
Just a comment. So again, most of the seniors that I took care of, a lot of them live in big old houses that they don't need the whole space. So and they don't have money. They can't even upkeep their own house. They can't put on new roofs and new sidings and painting and new bathrooms. So I don't think that many people are going to be building a detached ADU. That's expensive. Most of them are going to take their unused basement and turn it into an apartment. Or their second floor where they can't get up there anymore, and they're going to turn that into an apartment. So most of these, I think, are going to be houses that people don't need the whole usage of, and they will recycle that in a really inexpensive way without building more buildings. That's expensive.
Councilmember Marshall?
Just remind everybody that as long as we have a very hot real estate market, we can have elderly folks selling these places, moving out, and this stuff turning over regardless of the ownership requirement. So that's also something to consider.
All right, so we have a motion on the table. Are you clear on the motion?
Did we get a second?
Yes.
Yes. we
I
got a
am.
second.
I can repeat it if you'd like.
So 799 and below is 1, 8,000 and above is 2.
And to clarify, was that 2 including both one attached and one detached?
One detached.
Or 2 attached?
That's a separate piece of your document, so do we want to take that
I think
separately,
the-
or?
the 8 and above is 2, 1 attached, 1 detached, like planning commission recommends. The other one is 1, either or, correct?
Well, in my,
They're separate topics. We're just voting on the one topic right now, which is
minimum lot size. But we
for
have 2
a
minimum lights.
detached ADU. That is the motion on the table.
So then, for a detached ADU, is it 799 or is it above 8? You're nodding your head to both of those.
so 799 and below, you just get one ADU
Yes?
of any kind,
No, well, that's,
and above 8,000, you get,
but Councilmember Shrubnik says we're not voting on that, on this one.
We're not voting on the kind. That was a separate,
Got
that
it.
was a separate thing.
So, 1, 799 and below, 2, 8,000 and above. That is the motion on the table with the second.
then eventually we'll get around to the discussion of
Yes.
what's the 2 look like.
Yes.
One of each, is that the
Yes.
limitation or
That will
one of our
come
options?
back. I think there's a question on the table for that one. All right, so, clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Curtis,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Herbig,
Yes.
Mayor Baker,
Yes.
Councilmember File,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
No.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane,
Yes.
passed.
All right. We got a motion on the table, but let's go to the question. What did we find out?
So what we found out, and I think this was the question, was how many it takes for a point of order? Was that the question?
For which?
The
Call
call for,
for the
I'm sorry, call for the question. It is a 2/3 requirement. And,
Reconsider was the real question.
oh, and that's a majority,
That's a simple majority.
correct.
Fine. All right, let's go back to the issue that's on the table. And, pardon?
The motion on the table
Yes.
that I made. So that was,
Is allowable number of ADUs.
right, and the motion was
Would
to
you
go with one of each or 2 detached. Excuse me, 2 attached, or one of each.
Okay, but is there any distinction between lot size?
We've already just heard.
We just
We
did
did
that,
vote
yeah.
lot size.
Yep.
But we did not make any determination on what was allowed on the 8 or the 799 and below.
We just talked
Yeah.
about.
So we're not going to talk about that at all.
We covered it.
We covered.
I think the question
covering
is,
it in
if you
order.
have a 7,999
Yep.
size lot,
You only get
is it,
one.
you can only have one, but can it be detached, or can it only be attached?
Either one.
Either one. I think
Either
that-
one.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right, we clear?
I mean, unless there's some dissent on that, I mean, I think everybody was.
All right. Clerk, please take the roll.
How about we state the question again?
What?
Since we're coming back to an old one,
What?
So,
state what we're voting on again.
We are voting on the number of ADUs that are allowed. And the number is 1 at 79.99 and below, and 2, 8,000 and above.
The 2 can be,
Now, don't go with which types, because I already tried that and I was told no.
no, that's what we're doing now.
I thought we were going to
That
talk
is what
about
we're
that
doing
with
now.
this
Well, I
motion.
thought we were too, but I was told no.
No, that was the previous.
So it's your motion.
Yeah, so
you-
my motion is one of any kind, and two can be one of each or two attached. That's the motion. Is there a
Right.
second?
I'll second.
Well, we already had a Councilmember
I
Curtis
thought we already have a
seconded.
motion and a second on the table.
I think she was just clarifying
Yeah,
what she
right,
thought
right,
the motion
right,
was.
and that's what I had
What
written
thought
down.
the motion was too.
All right. So, the clerk, please take the roll.
Mayor Baker,
No.
Councilmember Curtis,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
No.
Deputy Mayor Herbig,
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes?
Councilmember File,
Yes.
passed.
All right. So. Where do you want to go next?
I think that we might go to parking.
Great.
So the current requirement, when only one ADU is allowed, is that there be one additional parking stall. The Planning Commission recommendation is that there be one additional parking stall for each additional ADU.
Comments, questions? Let's start at the end. Councilmember O'Kane.
My recommendation, or I'm not asking a question, I'm just going to share my perspective. Additional parking adds expense for building ADUs and impermeable surfaces. We're also at a place where we're trying to get people out of cars and taking buses. I think the issue at hand is that we're trying to increase housing for people rather than cars. So I would prefer to not add parking requirements at all for ADUs in Kenmore, considering the majority of homes that would be having ADUs have adequate parking, considering 2 parking garage and 2 parking spaces in a driveway in general is my understanding. So I think there's adequate parking that's mandated in our housing already, plus there's plenty of street parking. I know that's maybe not something that makes people happy to hear, but I think that there's plenty of parking in housing in Kenmore.
Councilmember Marshall.
Oh, I hadn't raised my hand.
Councilmember Curtis.
So my question relates to what are the present parking requirements for a single house on a single lot?
The single house requires 2 parking stalls, and typically those are in a garage, and then there are usually 2 parking stalls in front of the garage because there is a requirement that the garage be set back 20 feet from the street if there's a driveway in front of it.
I thought garages were to store stuff in.
Question.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
So, on that, so given that that is the requirement right now, would that 20 feet fit enough for 2 cars?
Yes.
Yeah, so it would be no burden and no extra expense and no extra building to require that, right?
Right, it's currently
Okay.
required, and I think the Planning Commission was concerned about the notion of tandem parking, that your ADU would be
I
parked.
agree, and as you could see from the
Right.
research, it is the most common complaint, and I think out of all of these things, it is the thing that would be the most obvious for changing the character of the neighborhood, which is one of our central principles, is that we didn't want to alter the overall character of our single-family neighborhoods.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, we already are requiring 2-car garages and 20-foot setbacks and fit 2 more cars. That's more than enough parking for a house that has 2 ADUs. Our streets have plenty of open parking already. It's not used. People don't like to see cars parked out there, but that's what some of that right-of-way is for. And when we're talking about affordable housing, it's $10,000 to lay down a spot big enough for a car. So we're adding a fairly substantial cost to folks by adding another required parking spot, especially for these smaller units where people who live there statistically rely on cars less or have less car ownership. So I agree with Councilmember O'Kane. I don't think a parking minimum is necessary right now.
Councilmember File?
I agree with Councilmember O'Kane and Deputy Mayor Herberg on this issue and have nothing more to add.
I'd like to make a motion that we not require extra parking for the ADUs.
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
Second was Deputy Mayor Herbig, is what I heard.
He was allowed it, but Councilmember O'Kane also seconded either one.
Okay. And the motion's to not require extra parking for the ADU.
May I comment on that?
Sure.
So I think with 2 required garage spots and 2 20-foot spots up front, we got plenty parking for even 3.
I understand that. I just want to make sure you understand that, and I'm not saying one way or another, but the requirement is not that you have a garage with 2 stalls in it. The requirement is 2 stalls on your property, however that's configured.
I think I'm confused then.
So typically, with a new house, someone builds a garage that has 2 stalls in it, and then if they have a driveway to it, there are an additional 2 stalls. But that is not a requirement that they have a driveway plus the garage. I just want to make that clear.
So when I asked the question earlier on what were the requirements, so actually the requirements are just like 2 spots in front of the house would work with no garage at all.
Correct.
Okay, I think I was confused.
And what works when you have all your stuff stored in the garage?
Right.
And what happens when you have a car in the garage and your ADU parked in front of you so you can't get out?
It is time to clean out your garage.
So I think, see, I'm not sure, because that's a major misunderstanding that I had from what I thought I asked the question clearly, but I must not have asked it clearly enough.
It's because that is the typical. What I'm describing is that typically the 2 stalls are in a garage,
Yeah.
and there is a driveway in front of the garage, which by code, if you have one, has to be 20 feet in length.
But
So
it's not
that results
required
in
to have
4
any garage
stalls.
whatsoever.
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay.
May
At this
I?
point, we have a motion and we have a second.
Yes, we have a motion and a second, but we also have a question. Councilmember O'Kane.
So what I understood is if a house did not have that much, the garage with the 20 feet, that would be an exception. So the majority of homes, the vast majority, have adequate parking. And the requirement is generally met by market demand. People want that space when they buy a home. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Shrevenick,
No.
Mayor Baker,
No.
Deputy Mayor Herbig,
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis,
No.
Councilmember File,
Yes.
passed.
All right. You want to go to size limit or height?
We're past numbers.
There we go. I think we need to go to size limit.
Okay.
And we actually, because of the change to the lot size, we're going to have to talk about that for detached ADUs as well as attached ADUs. So for attached ADUs, the size limit currently is a percentage of the house or a certain number, and it may be 1,000 square feet. I'd have to look at it. The proposal is to move away from the percentage of the house, which is difficult administratively, and to move to a flat 1,000 square feet with an exception if you're going to take up a whole floor. So if you have a 1,200 square foot basement and you're going to put your ADU there, you request an exception because it's all on one floor. So that is the Planning Commission recommendation for attached ADUs, 1,000 square feet with an exception if all on a single floor.
I'll make a motion to that effect.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Councilmember Curtis.
I have a question. So I don't remember the written rules being that clear that it can be the whole floor. I thought it said people have to ask for an exception.
Correct. You request an exception.
Yeah, I would rather just state it can be the whole floor. Instead of somebody has to ask, can I do my whole basement at 1,200 square foot instead of 1,000? Just say right up front, it's approved. That's a subtle difference, but I think why make the difference?
I think the Planning Commission was concerned about the size of the house. So if you had a very large house and you said it could be a whole floor, that could be a substantially larger number than 1,000 square feet. So rather than do the blanket statement, they kept it just to the request.
So let's say if you had a 1,500 square foot house with a 1,500 square foot basement, and you can only use 1,000 square foot of it, you got 500 wasted feet. Who cares if the ADU is 1,500 square feet? I guess I don't see what's so magical about 1,000.
I don't see, yeah, like Councilmember Curtis says, I mean, if the floors, the size of the house is 1,500 square feet on the bottom and 1,500 square feet on the top, and 1,500 square feet on the third floor, why would you limit it to 1,000? Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I mean, as long as the envelope for the house fits within our current code, I don't see any reason why we're nitpicking about the exact size of the ADU within the home. What's going to affect the character of the neighborhood and how is the envelope of the house and how that looks. What's inside the house is kind of secondary, I think. So I'm fine with relaxing this.
Well, what happens when you build on an ADU that's attached to the house?
Right. In that case, you could make it, unless you have a size limit, it could be any size.
But it's supposed to be within the current zone, right?
Right. You could build to the setbacks.
Not giving them extra.
No. It gets more to the question of accessory. Is it accessory?
Councilmember Fowle.
So I agree with my colleagues here about the floor space of the footprint of the lower part of the house, for example. If it's a little bit smaller than 1,000 feet or a little bit greater than 1,000 feet, it really doesn't matter. We're creating a more affordable housing stock, and that is the primary goal here. So I think, quite frankly, I have to say my apartment is 1,000 square feet, and I have a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment. And in our communities, we have apartments across the street that are maybe 600 square feet or under that for a 1-bedroom, 1-bath. So if a homeowner happens to be creating a smaller ADU, that's just fine. We're creating affordable housing stock. We should be rewarding the effort. So I think that we're stretching when we say you have to have just 1,000 square feet. It seems a little ridiculous.
I sort of think there needs to be a distinction, though, because if there's no building onto the house, then it could be the square footage of the floor in the house. But if you're adding onto the thing and changing the footprint, there could be. Councilmember Shrubnik.
The motion on the table is to go with the Planning Commission recommendation, which is a maximum of 1,000 square feet that may be larger to take advantage of pre-existing floor space.
Motion vote?
Yes.
I still think I'm confused then. Does that say it requires special permission? Somebody has to ask and be allowed to do that, to use the whole floor, or they can just get it?
It could be written either way.
Because I'd like to, so as it is now, the motion on the floor, does it state? Oh, the state says to go with the planning recommendation. Can we make a friendly amendment and say without request for exception, or So it's just automatically granted. Maybe put it in the positive. Automatically granted if it's a whole floor.
So what's your
And it's
amendment?
not changing the floor footprint.
What's your
at all.
amendment?
That it would include the whole floor without needing to ask for permission?
All right, so is there a
As long as you're not
second?
changing the,
Is there a second on that amendment?
Second.
All right, so there's amendment in front of us that states that an exception or permission doesn't have to be granted if it covers the existing floor space.
Mayor, did you say does not need to be an exception is not required, you don't have to request an exception, correct? Yeah. Want to make sure
All right, clerk, have you got that?
I think so.
is there a clearer way to say it? Should we put it in the positive? It will be allowed, rather than say you don't have to ask for permission, say it will be allowed if it's a whole floor. Might be the clearer way
Since
to
you
do it.
guys are writing this up, do you have that?
I think we've
It's
got
the
it.
same thing with however you state it. I understand where you're trying to get to.
Okay, great. So, motion second on the table. Any further comments, questions? Clerk, please take the roll.
Okay, again, this is just on the amendment, correct?
Right,
That
this
it
is
would,
just on the
if it's the
amendment.
whole floor, you can
Yep.
do it without permission.
Right.
Okay. Mayor Baker,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Herbig,
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes?
Councilmember Marshall,
No.
Councilmember Curtis,
Yes.
Councilmember File,
Yes.
passed.
All right, that's the amendment. Now back to the main motion. And there's been so much discussion. Ms. Anderson, the main motion
The
As
main
you- as
motion
you
was
have
to
it,
go with the
with the
planning.
Planning Commission's recommendation.
Recommendation.
1,000.
Which was 1,000 square feet.
All right.
Except to take advantage of the full floor.
Ready for a vote?
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane,
Yes.
Councilmember File,
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
No.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Mayor Baker,
No.
Deputy Mayor Herbig,
Yes.
passed.
All right. ADU height?
Unfortunately, we need to go back to detached ADU size.
Okay.
Because of the change. So the current regulations, again, relate to percentage of lot size. And again, you can't do a detached ADU unless you have 10,000 square feet. The Planning
We've changed
Commission, correct. The Planning Commission recommendation was that on smaller lots, you were restricted to 600 feet. On larger lots, you could go to 1,000 square feet, and those 1,000 square foot allowances started at 10,000 square feet. So you've now changed the threshold, and so if you were to follow the Planning Commission's recommendation for lots that are less than 7,999, you could have an 800 square foot limitation, you could have a 600 square foot limitation. It's like where the break point is now that you are changing the lot size for a detached ADU.
800.
Councilmember Curtis?
It sounds like 800 would kind of keep the proportionality.
What if you had a 9,000 square foot lot?
What about 10%?
Yeah, because so they had, let's see, well, for 10,000 square foot lot, they had 1,000. For the 600 square foot a detached ADU is for what size lot?
The 600 was small, 4,500 to 5,399. And then for 5,400 to 9,999, it was 800.
I think 10%.
10%, would that work?
10% is a
Would-
good compromise.
Would that work, the math for you guys? So it would work for 10, it would work for 8, would it work for
Yeah.
6? Yeah, it would work for 6.
That probably
The
would
problem would be the really small lots, the 4,500 square foot lots.
We're not doing any detached for 6. I mean, we're just talking about detached right now, right?
Right.
Right, so we're not doing detached under 8,000
there we go.
anyway, right?
There we
Oh,
go.
no, we are.
No, either, one or the other, either one is approved.
Oh, okay.
So
I-
10% of the lot size.
I'm,
Sounds like a good compromise. Councilmember O'Kane.
I'm pretty close on that. I do think that smaller lots should be afforded more than 10%. So a 5,000 square foot lot, if you're going to build a detached unit on a 5,000 square foot lot, I think at least 600 feet would be reasonable. It's not that big, but it's a little bit more than 10%. So maybe 10% minimum, but 600 square feet for the smallest size detached, or, requirement.
I think we've lost a nuance here in our conversations, which are that you divide it into two thresholds, less 7,999 and less, and 8,000 plus in terms of your numbers of ADUs. But when you made your motion related to how many you could have, you said, okay, if both attached, and at the higher, at the lower level, you could have one attached or one detached, but you didn't put a lower threshold on. So you don't have a lot that's too small to put one of each, one or the other on. Is that correct?
That is what we voted.
That is correct.
State the question again, what's still confusing that we don't understand?
Okay, you talked about numbers of ADUs. 8,000 or less than 8,000, you could have one ADU, either attached or detached. 8,000 or more, you could have 2,000 or two ADUs, attached or detached or two attached. But then when you went back to the question of the lot size, there's no lower level below which you cannot have a detached ADU.
Correct, isn't that what?
That is not what the Planning Commission recommended. They said that a lot smaller than 4,500 could not have a detached ADU.
Oh, I see.
And we have lots smaller than that?
Yeah, I'm sure. Non-conforming lots.
Deputy Mayor.
I mean, I would assume, though, that once you get to 3,000 or 3,500 at that point, just when you're talking about setbacks and separations between the dadu and the main residence and all of that, you're probably not talking about anything particularly workable. So I think it might kind of self-regulate based on just other factors.
I think that's fine. That's a fine approach. That would work. I just am calling that out to you.
Councilmember Curtis.
So that's one approach, just to say that the small lots sort of manage themselves. The other one would to say below 4,500 square foot, you can only have an attached, and you can't put a detached.
That was the
That's
Planning
another
Commission
option.
recommendation.
And I don't have a strong feeling one way or another. But I do understand now they did have a limit. So what I should have said with the original motion was 799 down to 4,500.
Right.
Then we would have been consistent with what the Planning Commission already
Correct.
recommended.
So then, with what Councilmember O'Kane had said, 7,000 and below 600 should be the minimum.
That's close. I think I have a nuance. You should be able to go up to 600 square feet on the smaller lot size, rather than be, say, 400, 5,000, 500, be able to go up to 600 on a 5,000 square foot lot, for example.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Maximum size is 600.
Yeah.
If you want to build something 5, you could. You just can't go over 6.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure I was understanding we were speaking the same way. Thank you.
And then from 8 up, it should be 10%. At least that's my thinking. Deputy Mayor.
Well, I mean, I would propose that we allow 6 be the largest for the smaller properties. But once you get above 6,000 feet, then you just flip to 10% at that point.
Yeah.
Does that-
Agreed.
Does that work?
Agreed.
Okay.
Thank you, Nigel.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, can you please restate? Sorry.
I'm going to make the motion that for properties under 6,000 square feet, they're allowed to build a detached ADU up to 600 square feet. And once you get a lot above 6,000 square feet, they're allowed to build 10% of the lot size.
Got it.
Does that track?
I second that.
Councilmember Curtis.
I'm thinking we might need a friendly amendment, because my lot is 2.5 acres. So if I said 10% of 2.5 acres is my ADU, it'd be really big. So it feels like there might be a maximum, maybe up to the 1,000. Didn't 1,000 come in?
If somebody had a 2.5 acre lot, they should be able to build a 3,000 square foot home.
Not always possible, just trust me.
You can certainly subdivide a 2.5 acre lot.
Not feasibly.
I mean, I think
But that's a different issue. So, but the question is, are we addressing all the issues we need to?
And I hear you, Councilmember Curtis. I do think that is more the exception than the rule, and maybe permitting, other sorts of permitting would be able to control that.
I might point out the current regulation, which is at 10,000 square feet, so it's slightly different. But the way they regulated it was 10%, the current rules, 10% of the lot size or 50% of the primary dwelling, whichever is less. That tried to acknowledge the size of the existing house and again, keep the unit accessory.
My only concern with that is if you have somebody who's building both a mother-in-law and a dadu at that point, then then how are we considering the primary residence? If they've cut their home in half already, so they have a 2,400 square foot home into two 1,200 square foot residences, then they're only allowed to build a 600 square foot detached, even if they have a larger lot size. And I'm not sure if that's what we really want to do either, if that's how we're defining half of the primary size of the primary residence.
I would assume that the primary residence included the attached ADU.
If it does, I think that's probably acceptable as a maximum. Would that address your concerns, Councilmember Curtis? Do you
I
want
think
to
that would do it. So the maximum would be 50% of the original residence?
The original residence, yeah.
Before it was ADU'd.
Or the primary structure, or however staff thinks the best way to word it. We'd have to make an amendment to the motion.
We have a motion on the table right now that says 600 square foot minimum on smaller lot size and 10% on a larger lot size.
Yeah.
600 square foot maximum?
Yeah.
Right.
On lots under 6,000 square feet.
Right.
So we need to,
7,999. We have the two categories, 7,999 and above.
well, no, my motion was for under 6, they can build, under 6,000, they can build a 600 square foot dadu, if that's what they choose to do, if they choose to build a dadu.
And anything over 6 is 10%.
And then anything over 6% goes to 10%.
And my friendly amendment is to add a maximum, and that maximum would be 50% of the original residence.
And I'll second Councilmember Curtis's amendment to my
All right, so we have an
motion.
amendment on the table. Maximum is 50% of the existing house.
I just, before moving, I just thought maybe the 50% maximum should be on the lot sizes over 10,000. So 10% up to 10,000 and then the 50% over that, because that is about where the concern starts to come into play. I'm just concerned that I could have a 10,000 square foot lot, which I do, and a 1,500 square foot house. So my limitation would be to a 750 square foot detached accessory dwelling unit. So having a larger lot size with a smaller house, the way I heard this presented, I would be limited and wouldn't be given the opportunity for 1,000 square foot.
Yeah, so somehow we want the 10% rule to apply to you.
Yes. And anyone with a 10,000 square foot lot.
Yeah, I think that's fair too.
Yeah.
All right,
Somehow
this is
our math
really
is challenging
taking
us.
a really long time. We're
It's
not
real.
really progressing here. So
We're
let's
working through some
try
nuance.
to keep moving. It's getting later and we still have more to go through.
I can tell you that the Planning Commission reviewed this over 3 meetings
Yeah.
and
So
crafted their.
there is an amendment on the table to limit the size to 50% of the main residence. That is the amendment on the table that's been seconded.
The amendment to the amendment would be in order, am I?
Pardon?
An amendment to the amendment would be in order?
Oh, if you want to, let's do that.
Well, no, I think we're already deep in the weeds at this point.
Let's
We might
do
as well get to a place where we're happy instead of just, you know,
Right.
calling it a night because it's 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
So a place that's happy is vote everything down. So, but anyway, let's do that. Amendment to the amendment.
I'm just trying to figure out how to word it.
Right. Help us mathematicians out there. Do you understand what we want to do? How do we say that?
I'm not sure, I'm not exactly sure where you're going on this, because it can go either way. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is it's pretty clear what you want to do for lots under 6,000 square feet. All good on that. It's the lots over 6,000 square feet where you're struggling with, should there be a limit related to lot size and or size of primary residence? And you haven't given clear direction on that.
Did we, so the 10% was kind of our general rule, but then my thought was, should there be a limit, a maximum size? So that was my question.
Okay, I've got an idea. What if we just say 10, it can be up to 10% of the lot size up to 1,500 square feet, and then we'll just draw a line there. If they're above 15,000 square feet, they're not building bigger than 1,500. Does that?
That works.
Okay, so that's the amendment to the amendment I'll make.
So make the amendment.
I'm making the amendment to the amendment. I'm making the motion to add an upper limit of 1,500 square feet.
That's all.
All right.
Second.
So we have an upper limit.
Do we need a second on that?
Yes,
I think
we do.
we have
I'll
one.
second that.
Councilmember
Right,
O'Kane
so
had
we
it.
have an upper limit of 1,500 square feet for a detached ADU. All right. Let's go ahead and vote on that.
Councilmember File,
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
No.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Mayor Baker,
No.
Deputy Mayor Herbig,
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane.
Yes.
Passed.
All right, we're back to the amendment. And the amendment is,
That was the 50% of primary residence
Okay.
limitation.
yes, so the amendment is 50% of, the maximum size is 50% of the
Primary residence.
primary residence.
So if you,
And we had a second now, and then we just came up with a better solution.
right,
This is the one we want to get rid of.
Well, no, I think this one is setting the mid-range.
I
'Cause the
thought that was
motion I
10%.
just-
It's less than
No,
6,000
because
square feet.
what we just passed was an amendment to the amendment.
Right.
If we now vote down the amendment, we just voted down the amendment to the amendment.
Right.
So we have this thing, and we amended it with this, and we voted yes on this. If we
Okay.
vote this down, they both go in the trash.
Okay, we don't want that.
Right.
State what we're voting on then.
So what we're voting on, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think what we're voting on at this point is 600 square feet for under 6,000 square feet, and 50% of lot, and 50% of the.
10%.
10%.
There we go. That's what was
From
confusing.
6,000 to,
Yes.
I don't think we're there yet. I think we're at the amendment that says the maximum size can be 50% of the main house. That's where we're at.
yeah, you're correct, and
Amendment,
because we amended it to expand that to be a little bit bigger at the top end.
right.
The way I thought I heard it was that if we were 10% up to 15,000 square feet.
That's the main motion.
but
We're on an
which would be,
amendment right now.
right, yeah, I know, I'm just, Okay, I can vote. I'm afraid of
Right,
my vote.
so the amendment in front of us is the maximum size of the detached ADU can be 50% of the main residence or the primary property. Correct?
And it's been amended to say up to 1,500 square feet.
Correct.
I
Okay.
think we had 3 motions, and I'm sorry, but we'll have to call on Kelly to ask us. I think the first motion was the 6,000, the
That's
10% above 6,000,
Yep.
the 600 below. Then there was a motion that was made to add that clause about 50% of the
That's right.
primary structure that I think you all didn't like. And then there was a third motion to set that upper limit at 1,500
Right.
so that it would be 10% or a maximum of 1,500.
And that amendment we voted on. We have another amendment now that is
The 50%
50%.
primary structure,
exactly.
right.
So we're on the motion,
But with
on
the
the
amend-
amendment of 50% of the main structure.
And it's
Correct.
amended to be up to 1,500 square feet. That's what we just voted on, was the amendment
Yeah.
to that motion.
Right.
But that's already passed.
But it's on this amendment.
Yes,
It was
it's
an
on
amendment
this
to an amendment, so this is what we're voting on now, is the amendment with the maximum of 1,500.
Right.
I have a clarifying question because I thought I understood up to 1,500 square feet was for a 15,000 square foot lot. Is that correct?
Or bigger.
Or bigger, right. So the 10% up to 15,000 square feet. And my sense of that is the 50% of the house size is superfluous. Like, adding that in doesn't feel like it's adding value at this point.
All right, so the motion in front of us.
I have no idea. I have lost track of all the motions. I think I've kept track
No,
of
I
where
have-
you want to
I-
go
I-
to.
I have it. The motion in front of us is maximum size of a detached ADU is 50% of the main property.
With the amendment we've already voted on.
With the amendment we've already voted on. So, clerk, please take the roll.
Dawn, did you want to say something first?
I was going to recommend, but it sounds like the council's actually determined a pathway. I was going to say, if you're still struggling with the concepts, you could just table the motion and direct staff to go back with this discussion and come back with examples of scenarios to maybe, it sounds like there's still questions as to that middle motion.
Well, they're coming back with stuff anyway.
I know, but to table that motion in particular and then just direct staff to come back and
All
address
right, so
some
we
of the
don't want to table
questions.
this whole thing on,
And it didn't, right.
I think we
I think we're ready to vote, yeah.
you think what?
I'm not sure if I'm ready to vote.
Okay.
I'm not ready to vote.
So then you want to table it?
I move to table it.
So.
I think you have to be
Move
clear.
to table, detached ADU size.
Need to be
limit.
clear, you're tabling it to when?
Further discussion for staff to bring back recommendations.
It needs to be a date. Is it next meeting?
Next meeting.
2 meetings.
How's that work with what you guys are doing?
That won't work.
Okay, fine. Tell us what will work.
March 16th?
I think probably the soonest would be March 16th, just based on when packets have to go out, because the packet for the next meeting goes out on Friday.
Okay, so then the motion should be to table this till March 16th.
Motion to table this till March 16th regarding the size limits.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All right, so this motion is, all those in favor of tabling until March 16th, say aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
Just one no? Okay. So it passed.
Councilmember Marshall, you're not voting. Abstain. You abstain. And I'll vote no. So we now have 3 to 2. Motion passes. This is tabled until March 16th. Is that correct? I didn't hear your voice. I don't want to put words in your mouth. All right. Next one, ADU height.
Right, so the current ADU rules don't specify a height. It just follows the height of the underlying zoning district, which is 35 feet in most cases. The Planning Commission recommendation was to keep the 35 feet, but that only a single story over a garage or 2 stories if ground level could be built. So there was a restriction on number of stories because they were concerned that a 3-story structure might be built in the 35 feet.
Does anybody disagree with the Planning Commission's suggestion? What, we have found something that every council member filed.
Quite frankly, I have no problem if the ADU matches the height of the house, and it really doesn't matter whether it's 1 story, 2 story, or 3 stories. I think what we're wanting is just a quality build, right? And I don't know that it's a scary thing to have a 3-story ADU.
I'm happy with Planning Commission's recommendations. All right. Is there a motion to go with the Planning Commission's recommendation on height?
So moved.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? Clerk, please take the roll. We've lost 1 vote.
Councilmember Curtis.
Yes.
Councilmember File.
No.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Mayor Baker.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Herbig.
No.
Councilmember O'Kane.
Yes.
Motion passes. All right, ADU height settled. Door location.
Current rules say that you can't have 2 doors on the same side of the same street side of the building. Proposed regulations by the Planning Commission would say you can have the 2 doors on the same street side if one is clearly secondary or is disguised.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about split levels. You know, some people may decide to make it so that the entrance is both, I don't know, one goes up, one goes down if you're building that sort of ADU. So I don't know, I'm not that concerned about what the doors look like.
Does it deal with attached or detached?
It concerns attached.
Oh, attached, okay. Okay.
Matt,
Member O'Kane?
I prefer no regulation related to the doors. I'm not sure that our city manager wants to be in charge of going out to houses and determining whether the door placement is appropriate.
Well, I think that's more building department, but okay.
Yeah. But I think it's his decision. But anyway, so I prefer no door placement.
We would get him out in the summer, into the sun. Deputy Mayor, Councilmember Curtis?
I'm okay with that, too. I don't really see any need to be regulating the doors.
Anybody else? Councilmember Marshall?
And do back to the Planning Commission on that one. I think it's a question of character they were looking at, and aesthetics are important.
All right. So the motion in front of us is to?
I don't have a motion. Is there a motion?
So the chair will entertain a motion. Councilmember Marshall?
Do we move that we adopt the Planning Commission's recommendation as to doors?
Is there a second? Motion dies for a lack of a second. Let's try again.
Move to remove door placement as a requirement on ADU, on attached ADUs. Is that
I didn't
right?
hear that.
Move to move the door placement requirement.
Okay.
Or how would I say that? You understand what I'm
So
trying to say?
To remove the door placement requirement.
Yes.
Is there a second?
A second that.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember File?
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall?
No.
Mayor Baker?
No.
Deputy Mayor Herbig?
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane?
Yes.
Passed.
Passes. All right. I don't know. Got everything?
Yep.
You're
We'll be-
sure? We haven't, I
There-
guess we haven't done our job if you're not
I think
confused.
that you,
I actually have one, and I
Okay.
think looks like,
Councilmember
and we may
O'Kane.
want to table this for the 16th. I had some concerns about, I think it was I, regarding owner occupancy. I have real concerns that or I guess that's removed with what we put in item A. I thought I had read, just a minute, I have notes on this. Let me read this. There was language about but I think this is covered because of our first motion on owner occupancy being null at the ADU occupant. So I guess we don't need to worry about item I because that is superseded and removed, because item I spoke to if the owner was not going to occupy the building, the kitchen or the ADU attached features might need to be removed, or they would need to seek approval from the city manager if they have a hardship. And I personally think that the city shouldn't be in the business of understanding of, a person shouldn't have to express a hardship. But I think that is covered with the permit or the termination of the owner occupancy requirement. But that was my concern. I personally would like to have that item I completely stricken.
It would be removed with the owner occupancy change.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Councilmember Curtis?
As I was looking at what the other cities were doing, I kind of liked the one that a couple mentioned in different wording. One said encourage similar look and feel, and one was more proscriptive, said the same or consistent pitch, siding, and windows as the principal residence. So the reason I say that is because of what I saw in Wallingford, where these bungalow-looking houses would have these big, ugly, square things sticking out at the top of them that just looked horrible. And if we add those to a bunch of lots in Kenmore, I don't think people will be very happy. But there's a way to do a remodeling that's similar. It has a similar look and feel as the rest of the structure. So I don't know if one or the other is an easier way to enforce. So one just said encourage similar look and feel, and one was more precise, consistent pitch, siding, and windows.
All of those would require a design review of the accessory dwelling unit. So I'm not sure that one is easier than the other. I think the more detail is probably better. I think cautions might be the ability to develop an ADU that's a very simple structure, or the notion of looking at pre-approved plans and that kind of thing. If you regulate the design, that makes that more difficult. But I understand the perspective.
For the detached one, it can look different, because you can have, a cute little house out in the back. But when it...
Oh, you're talking about attached only?
Yeah, when you do the attached thing and you do a unit that looks so out of context with the rest of the house. Yeah, so I'm just talking about I'm sorry I wasn't clear on that. For the attached, to make whatever remodeling, if there is an external component, look similar with the rest of the structure. I mean, sometimes, you got the old houses with maybe cedar shake siding, and then you put the T111 big square thing sticking out of the top of the house. So it just looks so out of place. Yeah, separate little out in the back, the detached, I don't care if it's unique and different.
Councilmember O'Kane?
I have an art background and I study architecture and design, and these are things that are incredibly important to me personally. But I don't think the city should be regulating or making decisions about personal design choices on individual properties. So I definitely recognize the character that we care about, but I would rather the city not get into that sort of management on especially attached ADUs, because I would hope when people are investing in their homes, they're going to be erring on the beautification side rather than ramshackle.
Well, I would say that we have a lot of design guidelines that we've put in place for our different zones. So we do actually care, and we do give enough structure without being overbearing. So I think there's a balance that could be obtained. But if nobody else is interested, I'm fine.
Okay. Currently, there are no design standards for single-family zones.
I'm okay to just not address it then.
Councilmember File.
Nothing to add.
All right. Anything else on this? Councilmember Curtis.
So there was a question on property manager. Now that we've gotten rid of we've discussed the ownership issue, we don't have to discuss property manager requirement?
The Planning Commission didn't say anything about a property manager. Staff would recommend against it.
Okay, that's my thought too. Okay.
Councilmember O'Kane.
I have one item, but I think it's a little bit large and would need to be tabled for the next meeting with staff, with recommendations if it is interested, if the council is interested in proceeding. As part of this, my question would be, would the council be interested in pursuing climate action type incentives, net gain incentives for ADUs? So that when people are building ADUs, they are adding, say, a rain garden to their property, or solar panels, or heat, water, waste reduction features, things that can improve the efficiency of the home. Maybe it's special windows. I just thought I'd put it out there.
And what do they get rewarded for doing that?
I guess it wouldn't necessarily, we'd be rewarded by having more efficient homes or ADUs. It was just something I want to put on the table. Do we want to proceed with something like that or not?
Deputy Mayor.
I think it's an interesting idea. I think it's probably part of the larger climate discussion rather than jumping in, kind of coming in on this one right now. I think we'll be having a larger discussion around construction anyway when we get to climate, because it's such a big part of the climate discussion. So I think there will probably be a place for that there, I would think.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yeah, and I just think it's a great idea. It could include something like placement to preserve existing trees.
Anything else? Councilmember O'Kane.
I just wanted to say I appreciated both Deputy Mayor Herbig and Councilmember Marshall's input here. Thank you.
Anything else?
Yes.
Councilmember File.
Just one last thought is on ADUs and how attached ADUs with, multiple doors facing the streets and design features such as building out the front of a home as a facade where it has like a single door entry, and you enter that entry and there's two doors on the inside too, one to the ADU and one to the main home. Those are common features found in ADUs elsewhere. Good examples are San Francisco and New Orleans. And I think that you can have a beautiful neighborhood by building out a facade and building character. And I would like to encourage that if we could. I don't know that it's a requirement in what we're doing or how we can facilitate encouraging that.
There's currently no design standards in single-family zones. That sounds like a design standard. And being as you've requested that the door locations not be addressed, seems to me that would be a change in direction to go towards design standards. So unless there is a majority of council giving direction for staff to explore design standards or something related to environmental sustainability, those will not be brought back on the 16th. Okay, we'll be back on the 16th.
Well, no, wait, we're not done yet.
Maybe.
We're not done yet. Tree canopy. Do we want to get into, Councilmember Marshall brought up tree canopy on lots with ADUs and trying to preserve it. Do we want to get into this at all? Councilmember O'Kane.
It is important. I do agree. Tree canopy is an important consideration. I do think we are going to be addressing it in other ways, but I would be open to including tree canopy requirements.
Councilmember Curtis.
I'm inclined to agree with Deputy Mayor Herbig on the previous idea that climate change, tree canopy, all those things are a major, really important issue that we'll be dealing with somewhere else. And to tack those big issues onto this one, I think would seriously delay this project from moving along.
Councilmember Fowl.
I think if we think about our tree canopy and we think about what happens if we build out and remove a tree, I think we can also encourage planting a new tree in its place. That takes away some old growth occasionally, but I think it would then further encourage thoughtfulness in design.
So this lends itself to another question, since I've heard a lot of comments on tree canopy in that. Is there some point when we get into the climate and the other issues, do we want to open the tree regs and take a look at that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Anything else? All right, next item on the agenda is ordinance number 20-0507, relating to a non-exclusive cable television franchise agreement approved by ordinance number 08-0282, approving transfer of control from franchisee Frontier Communications Northwest, Inc. to Northwest Fiber, LLC, and authorizing the city manager to execute transfer control agreement and cable franchise settlement and extension agreement. Ms. Owsley.
Mayor and council, the hour is late, so I will be very brief. That was a long agenda item title, but it really says what we're here to ask for your approval on, which is approving the transfer of a cable television franchise to Northwest Fiber. This is currently held by Frontier Communications, and that has been the case since 2009 when Frontier took over a cable franchise from Verizon. So this ordinance also authorizes signature of a settlement agreement, which we've had a chance to review earlier this evening and in previous conversations. Also, there is the actual transfer of control agreement. So just a couple of additional items. The settlement agreement extends the term of the current franchise agreement by 1 year to August 2021. That gives the new owner, Northwest Fiber, a chance to assess the current infrastructure, particularly in the south end of the city, and how they're going to meet the build-out requirements that were established in 2008. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions? So the chair will entertain a motion to approve ordinance number 20-0507 relating to a non-exclusive cable television franchise agreement approved by ordinance number 08-0282, approving transfer of control from franchisee Frontier Communications Northwest, Inc. to Northwest Fiber LLC, and authorizing the city manager to execute a transfer control agreement and cable franchise settlement and extension agreement. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Marshall?
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
Councilmember File?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Herbig?
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane?
Yes.
Passed.
Thank you.
All right. Let's go next with our city manager. Welcome back, Mr. City Manager.
Thanks.
Staff report.
Yeah, I have just a few things. No, I'm just kidding. But I have nothing.
What? Nothing?
Welcome back.
All right. Councilmember reports and comments. Councilmember O'Kane.
I was going to say something more, but I didn't know the meeting was going to go so long, so I'm going to keep this very brief. I want to thank the council for recognizing Black History Month and Women's History Month next month, and giving Nadia Reina Silver the opportunity to have an extended speech. I felt it was quite moving and spoke to the importance of Black History Month, so I genuinely appreciate that we were able to move forward with that. I also, I had some notes, but I just want to say I really appreciate each of the people who came to public comment today, and that they took time to make their voices heard. So I wanted to say thank you to Elizabeth Mooney, Nadia Reina Silver, Sarah Hayashi, and John Hendrickson, and Karen Prince for each of their comments this afternoon or evening. Thank you.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yeah, I have to second Councilmember O'Kane, and that speech by Ms. Silver was just amazing. We also I also wanted to highlight, I don't think I did from last time we were here, a clean out at Swamp Creek that was organized by Ms. Manajinsky, and several of us attended. Man, we must have pulled out about 6 tires that were embedded in the mud, grown over by trees in Swamp Creek. It was pretty gnarly for sure, but the place got cleaned up.
Councilmember Curtis.
Nothing to add.
Councilmember File.
Nothing to add.
Deputy Mayor.
Nothing to add.
Well, I've got a number of things. Given the late